All right, so we're going to start from the top. Hello, we have a fellow named Wick Sounds. I don't know if I've ever seen you here before, Wick Sounds. Thanks for the strong first comment given your name, Wick Sounds. Peanut Butter Beatrice, good to see you too. Eggs D, good to see you too. From the top, if you are listening in, hello, everybody. If you are listening in on the Podcastoverse and you are not in the YouTube channel or the Twitch channel, what I am doing is I'm responding to people who are here in the YouTube verse on Tuesdays, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can come on down, ask me questions, challenge me, maybe hear an alternative perspective about what's going on. What we're doing is basically just discussing the decline of Western civilization, the decline of America, certainly, and Canada and Europe's and Australia's role in all of that and what we should do given the massive decline that we have put ourselves into. We read articles, we discuss it. If you would like to join in the conversation, come on down, www.thecanadiancommy.com. You can have a conversation with me, join in the chat, air your concerns. If you're feeling like you're alone out in the world, that you have concerns and you see what's going on around you and you bring them up to the people around you and they all kind of just hand wave it away. Tell you to just work harder, right? Just grind set. It's maddening, isn't it? It's maddening. It's maddening. Long Defiant, good to see you. Oddity, good to see you too. Long Defiant writes, it was never a civilization, just an accumulation. Yeah, I mean, that's more or less my position, right? Like, it's never actually done anything that has, like, a lasting cultural, like, the history of settler colonialism, it really is just like in the 60s, 50s or 60s, where America as an idea kind of comes up and takes any kind of form whatsoever. And it makes total sense that a project based on the idea of extermination and war is not going to be able to maintain itself. And we're seeing that idea, the idea of building a society off of theft and death and the ethnic cleansing, manifest itself now in the Middle East, in Palestine, the occupied territories of Palestine, where the American project, or what was originally the European project of ethnic cleansing and theft, is now having cleared through America and Latin America, South America, fairly successfully, is now turning its eye on the Middle East and will seek to ethnically cleanse the Middle East, which is its fundamental goal. It's the fundamental goal of this project. They might not be so open about that idea of completely ethnically cleansing the Middle East, but that's what they're openly doing to the Palestinians right now. And it's only a matter of time. Like, they'll ethnically cleanse the Palestinians, and then suddenly it'll be the Lebanese, and then suddenly it'll be the Iraqis, the Sunni and the Shiites, and then it'll be the Iranians and the Saudis, right? Because that's how the system of capital works. That's how the system of capital operates. It's just constantly seeking more growth, more gains. How do we exterminate and steal more resources? There's no end to it. And as capital moves around the system, as capital moves around the natural world, it'll erect little capitals of capital, right? Like the United Arab Emirates is a capital of capital, right? The tech industry, the Seattle, right, is a center of global capital. One could argue that Wall Street is a center of global capital, and they'll just move around and destroy whoever they need to destroy in order to accumulate more wealth for themselves. And so, in that way, it's kind of something like a civilization, although one would argue that a civilization, one of the very first things that it attempts to do is actually build stability. And I don't think that the West is at all interested in building even a modicum of stability. They're not interested in any of that. And then Long Defiant says they just got jealous when they met real civilizations. I just don't think they understand what they're looking at, right? That through the technological advancement, like, other civilizations were unwilling to ethnically cleanse in the way that the Europeans were willing to do, and were unwilling to use the technology that they had. Like, China discovered gunpowder well before the West did. They just weren't willing to use it in this manner. And it's it's this ethnic cleansing. It's this, just like, we always point to the Nazis and say, like, oh, these guys were horrible, demonic, evil forces. Well, that's what America was built on. America was built on exactly the same principles, and they were successful. Like, what we are living in and what we are looking at is a successful Nazi experiment, right? That the Nazis looked at us and said, hey, how do we do that? How do we make that happen here? How do we make it so that it's all just one thing and we just ethnically cleanse the whole thing, right? And so I think it's actually even worse, Long Defiant. I think that we just don't have an idea of what civilization actually is. Like, it's not that we met real civilizations and then got jealous and we're like, we'll show you. I think it's literally just like, no, we're a civilization and you're barbarians, and that's it. Full stop. Anything that they are doing is inferior in our worldview and in the way that we view things here in the West. So the idea that they are a civilization and we are not, or that they are doing something that's even worth looking at, like, this is how China has caught America with its pants down completely, right? Because America literally is like, these people are inferior to us. Like, the only reason we're even negotiating with these people is because we feel we can get something out of it. And eventually we'll just begin the process of ethnically cleansing them as well. Because that's the goal of the West. That's the only goal of the West, is to just ethnically cleanse territories and make everything suitable for Americans. White Americans specifically. And Long Defiant says, not just growth. It has to be the right kind of growth. Yeah, I would like to start with an article today about specifically what that specific type of specific growth is, which is this worship of money, right? We're seeing it from the Financial Times with an article here. But before that, Jeff says, good to see you, Jeff. Hit the like, share, subscribe, and join the Patreon for access to the Discord. Thank you, Jeff. Always looking out for my back. Yeah, be sure to hit the like, share, subscribe, guys. It does help on the algorithm. It does help me out. From the Financial Times, China loses third of billionaires as economy falters. So let's make it real clear what my position is. For the regulars here, you guys know what I'm going to say. China does not worship money the way that we do, right? China actually has this idea in their head that, hey, wait a minute, what if we actually, like, produced goods and built infrastructure and, like, had things? Like, what if we built solar panels? What if we built so many solar panels that it was like free, clean energy forever? And whenever they do that kind of thing, we get these articles from the Financial Times that are saying, oh God, it's economically unfeasible. Nobody will be able to make any money from the free energy that they're producing. This is the complaint of the Financial Times, because the Financial Times are religious acolytes that worship money, and they worship exclusively money, and they don't care how you get the money. And if you were to produce a machine, like if you made a self-repairing machine that all it did all day long is spit out free, delicious tasting, completely nutritious food, it just pulled it out of the atmosphere. Like literally taking the particles of carbon that exist around us and converting it like a replicator. And it was powered for free, and everything was free, and everybody got free food and free nutrition. Like they didn't need to work for it. They literally walked up to the machine and just pooped it in their hand, and they could eat it, and it would be the most delicious thing they would ever eat, and so healthy for them, right? The Financial Times would publish an article saying, but nobody's making any money. That's unsustainable. How can you sustain a system where money isn't involved? Right? Forget about the fact that it's obviously a sustaining system. And then, of course, the Financial Times, what they would recommend is that we go in and destroy this machine because nobody can make any money off of it, because what matters is the money. And so we're about to read an article from the Financial Times that really, I'm seeing it more and more. It's almost daily now. But some are worth looking at and some aren't. And I think this one's worth looking at. Right? China loses third of billionaires as economy falters. ByteDance chief Zhang Yemin leads country's rich list with $49 billion fortune. Oh no, guys. Oh no. The $49 billion guy will have to just do with like $999 million instead. Whatever will he do? The number of China's dollar billionaires has fallen by more than a third in the past 3 years, according to a rich list compiled by research group Hurun, as government crackdowns, weakness in parts of the economy, and depressed equity markets take their toll. So China is taking its medicine to specifically expunge itself of these worthless parasites that call themselves billionaires, and the Financial Times is like, oh no. Since hitting a peak of 1,185 in 2021, Hurun said the number of dollar billionaires had been reduced to 753. So whatever China is doing is working, with the 36% decline exceeding a 10% fall in the renminbi's value against the dollar over the same period. So China will purposefully decline the value of its currency for various reasons, and that's hurting the billionaire class. So it's a successful policy. In the past year alone, the number of dollar billionaires in China declined by 16%, when the renminbi depreciated by only 2.5% against the dollar. Right? So this is how pathetically worthless these billionaires are, that all it takes is like a minor depreciation of the currency, which China does all the time. One of the big complaints that organizations like the Financial Times has of how China does business is that China will devalue its own currency to make it more attractive to other investors and other people to be able to do business in China, right? And of course, the Financial Times looks at this as heresy because they view money as the point. They think that money is the most sacred thing that exists in all of existence, and that there's, like, if you have all the money in the world on a desolate island, then you're good. That's how they view things. And all of these billionaires are losing all of this equity as being reported in the Financial Times because China is altering the value of their currency and it's making them lose money, which is good. We don't need these billionaires. They are worthless. Like, they achieve nothing. They do nothing for us. They are a drain on the economy 100%. The list has also undergone rapid churn, Hurun said, with older entrepreneurs such as property developers making way for newer members, such as Zhang Yemin, head of ByteDance. The 41-year-old founder of the company that owns viral short video platform TikTok and its Chinese equivalent Douyin has for the first time become the nation's richest person. With a fortune of $49 billion, Hurun said, despite his company being targeted by the U.S. government. Yeah, it shows you the power of the U.S. government, right? Oh, so scary, powerful U.S. government. Zhang deposed bottled water king Zhang Shanshan. The 70-year-old had topped the list in the past 3 years, but his main business, Nongfu Spring, saw its share price drop below 40% after being accused on social media of being pro-Japan. Like, look at who these billionaires are, right? Literally a guy who is taking clean water and bottling it in plastic bottles was the richest guy, and now it's a dude who owns TikTok. Like, these people are desperately, 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 desperately unimportant. Oh, hey, Kamala Harris is in my chat right now. Hello, Miss Harris. Good to see you. Today is a beautiful day in our nation. As the end of the line approaches, we become sure that the aspirations of the American people will succeed. Heart emoji. Thank you so much, Kamala, for your hopeful message that I'm absolutely sure. You should share that with Dick Cheney, right? The next time you see Dick Cheney and you're giving him a hand job, right, make sure that you say that the Canadian commie is so grateful and glad for your work. That'd be so hilarious if it was actually Kamala Harris. The rich list also included Hong Kong, Macau, and the Taiwanese entrepreneurs. The list has shrunk for an unprecedented third year running. Yeah, taking your medication works, right? Take the medication, it reduces the parasite. As China's economy and stock markets had a difficult year. Oh no! The stock markets! Like, China's economy is fine. Home ownership is well up. Like, most people own their houses. Wages are up. The quality of life for the average Chinese citizen is up. Like, by all indications, the Chinese economy is humming along very, very nicely and growing and being fine. Where is it not humming along nicely? There are less billion now there's less parasites in the system to extract wealth and value from the people who are actually doing the real work in the country. Like, that's what a billionaire is. You don't become a billionaire because of your hard work or your ethic. You do it by siphoning wealth away from people who are actually working. The list estimates of fortunes were made at the end of August and do not account for the sharp stock rally in September. Ooh, the rich people feelings. After China announced a monetary stimulus package. The downturn in the number of super rich comes as the old guard of wealthy real estate developers has been decimated by a collapse in China's once booming property market. I mean, yeah, you reach the end of growth. You build all the buildings, right? Like, once you build all the buildings and you're looking around being like, okay, we built all the buildings, what's next? Right? Like, anybody who was rational, anybody who was actually capable of doing basic economic analysis would actually say, okay, cool, we built it. We did it. Look at all the stuff we built. Look at the super highways. Look at the high-speed rail we built. Look at the cities we've built. Look at this massive infrastructure. Look at the militarization that we've undergone, the modernization of our military. Any sane, rational, logical person who actually thought about economics outside of this very tight, narrow religious ideology that's being presented by the Financial Times would say, no, this is a massive success. And we don't need to continue developing property. Why? Because we've done it. We don't need to build more cities, right? We've built the cities. Here they are. You can look at them. They're easy to see, right? It's only in the capitalist world, it's only with this narrow, tiny religious ideology that would say a move away from a project after it's finished is a collapse, right? We finished the project. Let's move on to other projects. Oh, that's collapsed. The economy has collapsed. Like, that's a stupid way of discussing this stuff. And yet the Financial Times can't help itself. It has to describe these things in the worst possible way, while completely ignoring, like, the internal collapses that the empire is undergoing right now. It's only a collapse if it happens to China. If it happens to America, it's a restructuring. China's e-commerce billionaires have been hit badly by crackdowns, but have proven more resilient. Pony Ma, the founder of Tencent, the company behind the ubiquitous super app WeChat, ranked third on the list. And Colin Huang, the founder of Pinduoduo and Temu, was fourth. So literally just people peddling bullshit, right? Like marketers, essentially. Really, really highly useful people. People who were all like, oh man, it's so good that this guy's the fourth richest person in the country. It makes sense. Chris Zhu Yangtian, founder of international clothing platform Shein, was ranked 76th with $7 billion in wealth. And that's like fine. That's even too much, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I don't think it's healthy for a person to have $1 billion. They just shouldn't have it, right? And if the story is we're getting less of these people, good. We should do more of that policy. It's successful. The new generation of entrepreneurs in China are much more international than their predecessors, Hurin said in the report. Yeah, like, billionaires have no loyalty to anybody. They only worship themselves, right? They don't care about their country. So they're going to try to get out of the situation. Like, they're going to exploit whoever they can exploit to the maximum amount that they can exploit them, and then abandon them the second that anything happens, right? That's what these people are. Alibaba's Jack Ma, who topped the list in 2020 but disappeared from public view that year after the government canceled the blockbuster initial public offering of his financial group Alipay, was ranked 10th this year. Huron said 15% of the rich list lived outside mainland China, in Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwan, while 30 members lived in the United States and Singapore, with the Asian city-state becoming increasingly popular as an offshore haven for China's billionaires. Yeah, I'm sure that's a good thing for China, right? It's super good that you have these guys extracting as much wealth as they possibly can to offshore accounts, right? That's super worked out for us. So definitely China should keep allowing their parasites to continue doing that. The rich listers also retain political influence, with about 7% being members of China's top political advisory body, the Chinese People Political Consultant Conference, or its rubber stamp parliament, the National People's Congress. I love it how they always say rubber stamp parliament. Such a joke. Like, these people are not actually journalists, right? Ooh, Kamala Harris says in the chat, "You know, John, my father himself was a Marxist, so it's always a pleasure to get in contact with such strong fighters for our nation issues. I've always been for the middle class because I am from it." I admire the commitment. I gotta tell you, Kamala. I admire the commitment. I think my favorite thing that's going on with the coconut heads is they keep trying to gaslight people who refuse to support the Harris administration because of her pro-genocidal views, saying like, "Oh, the Republicans will be worse. The Republicans will be worse." Like, okay, cool. So what? Like, I'm not supporting them either. Like, if you want my vote, like my vote isn't yours and you're losing it, you know. My vote is mine. It is my property. It is mine for which I am supposed to do what I feel is right with it. It's not yours by default, right? You have to earn that shit. And peddling out Bernie Sanders and having him go, you know, I don't agree with what Kamala Harris is doing and what Joe Biden is doing, and if we vote her in, then I'm gonna push her to the left. Yeah, right. Just like you push Biden to the left, right? Like, the entire thing is an obvious fraud, and it's obvious that it's a fraud. Like, it's a shocking fraud, and our participation in it is not taken for granted, right? Like, that's the thing that these Democrats are learning. You're just going to sit there and literally just be like, "Oh, well, if you don't vote for me, then Trump will win, then Trump will win." You're just as bad. Like, you're just as bad. Like, that's how you know these people are cultists, right? Like, that's how you know there's a real blue mega cult. Is that they don't see that they're just as bad. Like, they actually think that somehow they are better. And they're not. And it's clear to anybody who has stepped outside of their shitty little system and actually looks at them for what they are. Like, Democrats are just as bad. Worse in many cases. Like, at least the Republicans don't pretend like they're something. Right? Like, that to me is the great Democratic sin, is that the Democrats play this game where they pretend like they're better. They pretend like they support all of these ideas and these policies, and they don't. Like, that it's like fraudulence at the highest possible level. That's what it is to be a Kamala Harris supporter. Is to support all of these policies and then accept it when they do nothing to protect those rights. When they do nothing to enshrine anything, when they don't protect it at all. Because they're fraudulent liars. They're full of shit. They're genocidal maniacs. Like, the accusations towards Donald Trump that he's as bad as Hitler are projection. The Democrats are literally funding 70% of Israel's war costs. That means that this genocide can't happen without America funding it. Like, any Democrat out there who is like seething at people not instantly supporting their party because, oh God, the Trump administration will get it. You guys are Nazis. Like, you guys are fucking Nazis. And it's obvious that you're Nazis. And the most disgusting part of the little game that these Democrats play is that they pretend like they're not. They pretend as though they are actually these virtuous, good people, and that what's going on overseas is just an unfortunate. We can't prevail. Oh my God, it's so like fuck you, you little creepy Nazis. You know exactly what you're doing. You know precisely and exactly what you're doing. You're just too cowardly to actually put the jackboots on. You're just too cowardly to come out in front of the public wearing the uniform. You're too cowardly to actually play the role. That instead you're just this sniveling, snide, shitty, pathetic little person being like, there's nothing I can do. We have to drop bombs on Palestine, and it's just how it is. There's nothing we can do, and if you don't vote for me, it'll be worse. The Trump people will make it worse. Just shut up. Just shut up. It's just so fucking embarrassing. Like, at this point, it's just an embarrassment. And nobody should believe a word you have to say. I have stopped listening to all of these people. Like for real. Like, Bernie Sanders came up on my feed the other day because they're really trying to shove him down our throats right now because Bernie sold himself out to the genocide. And now he's trying to play this game of like, well, I'm against the genocide, actually. That's why you should vote for the genocide, because then I'll be against it, even though I'll be completely powerless to stop it. But then at least I'll be against it. We all know that the Trump administration will be worse on the genocide that we Democrats actually started. Okay, cool. Bernie, you fucking fraud. You fucking loser. Just like, and the moment he turned the corner and started to try to justify this genocide, I was like, bye-bye. Stop listening to these people. Don't listen to AOC. Don't listen to Bernie. Don't listen to Kamala. Don't listen to Biden. Don't listen to Schumer. Don't listen to any of these guys. I don't understand why I would listen to their opinion on which Pokemon they like the best. Like, I'm not going to listen to their opinions on anything. They're worthless. They're beyond worthless. They're past worthless. Like, at least the Republicans don't pretend like they're good. At least the Republicans don't pretend like they're not trying to fuck shit up. Right? Like, it's just so obviously disgraceful and disgusting. Like, you're such obvious liars, and you are pretending like you're not liars. And you've been caught. You're a liar. Like, you'll say something, and I'll just say, but you're lying. And that's the end of the conversation as far as anybody should be concerned. And yet the Democrats keep going along as if they aren't these psychopathic Nazi-level liars. But they are. And it's obvious. So get completely bent. Get fucked, every Democrat. If you vote blue no matter who, you're as bad as the mega cult. And the blue mega cult is a real phenomenon that is just caught up on its own shit. And is as bad as any of these fucking mega cultists. And I argue, actually worse. Like, if it genuinely does come down to a lesser of two evils conversation, if it genuinely is, you know, sure, the Democrats have done bad things, but you got to vote for the lesser of two evil, okay, that'd be the Republicans then. If that's the conversation you want to actually have, right, then guess what? You lose. The Democrats lose that conversation. The Republicans are the lesser of two evils. Wasn't the Republicans that started this genocide. Wasn't the Republicans that started the Ukrainian war and did the coup in Ukraine. It's not the Republicans that are starting all these wars recently. Looks like it's the Democrats. Oh, okay. So you even lose that way. And let me be extraordinarily clear. Fuck the Republicans, too. Right? Fuck these guys. They're obviously psychos. Like, very clearly. But at least they're honest. At least they're like, yeah, I like money, and I want money for myself. How do I get money? I take it from people. That's how you make money. You know what I don't like? I don't like it when people have opinions and tell me not to do things. We should have less regulation. There you go. CH, good to see you. Arabs in Michigan are like 50% voting green. 40% of people won't vote, but with 30 GOP and 30 Dems, that 40% could actually give it to Stein. That'd be fun. It'd be fun. Suddenly like a Jill Stein victory. Just a snap up. I mean, at this stage, what do we have to lose, right? Like, what do we have to lose? If you're still bought into the idea that the electoral system is worth a damn at all, then don't vote Democrat or Republican on anything. I don't know why anybody ever thinks that voting Democrat or Republican is a good idea. Like, it's so obviously mental constipation at this point. Like, the only moral choice to take is to not vote Republican or Democrat. That's like literally the only moral decision outside of non-participation. Like, non-participation, in my view, is the best choice. And then from there, if you have to vote, because there's still something inside of yourself that actually believes that the electoral system is possible to respond to you, which it doesn't, clearly. Like, all of the evidence shows that the electoral system no longer responds to us. But if you're still caught up and you still have that belief, oh, it's got to be the case, if only everybody went out and voted for this one candidate, it would really matter. Well, if you still believe that, then voting Democrat or Republican is just a fool's errand. It's just folly. Total. CH writes, your vote doesn't even count in a hard red or hard blue state. That's such a baffling phenomenon, eh? The idea of a hard red or a hard blue state. Like, talk about just living in a state where people have just stopped thinking, right? Like, where there's no such thing as thought. I vote blue because blue is the blue, and I vote for the blue, and the blue is the blue, and we blue. And that's it. I vote red because the red is the red, and if you don't vote red, then you're dead. Red. Like, it's got a real, like Dr. Seuss kind of quality about it. Just, these are the people who vote red. They vote red because they vote red. Why do they vote red? Because they vote red. And that is why they vote red. And that's it. Like, what could be a larger political failure than that? Just voting for a color because that's the color. Long Defiant writes, I'm voting green for Palestine. Yeah. I mean, I think that is a moral decision. That guy, good to see you. Fiddleford, good to see you too. Lawnmower Man, good to see you too. Shitload, let me start that again. Shitlib, Shitlib, Westoid Redditors posting Chinese police arresting people in masked Halloween costumes. Like the most obvious psyop in a hot minute. Yeah, it's embarrassing. Like, at this stage in the game, if the first thing that you think is, if you're not immediately going, it's probably not, right? Like, that's probably taken out of context. Then you are a dumb person, like, at this stage in the game. Like, here's a believable thing that's extremely believable. People wearing costumes in China do crime and are arrested for it. You know, like what happens here. People put on costumes and then do crime or are involved in mischief, right? And then the police get them and bring them in. What's the headline here in the West? People in China arrested for wearing costumes in public. Well, if you're stupid, you'll believe that, right? But it's just beyond dumb to believe that. Bound TRS over on Twitch, the alternative is a multi-party system, and both the red and the blue don't want that. So you'll never get enough traction to be any kind of threat. Yeah. No, like, look, why would a system that does not respond to the electorate ever be interested in introducing the idea of a system that responds to the electorate into it? Like, it's over. It's why I don't do a lot of electoral coverage. It's why I'm not constantly bringing up like polls and constantly discussing like what's going on in this state and what's going on in that state, because the outcome is actually irrelevant, right? The outcome has cultural significance, right? There is cultural significance to the outcome. Because the only people who actually have their vote counted and who actually matter are the people who have bought in to the culture war, to the cultural argument of it and the cultural side of it, because that's all that's being offered. Because if you can't have a conversation about the actual economics of the country, right, all that's left is a culture war. And so the outcome, i.e. Trump or Kamala, is important from a cultural standpoint. Who gets to be the smug people for the next 4 years? Who get to walk around being like, who gets to be like, we're the winners, we're the majority, you're the losers, you're the minority? Who gets to be like that for the next 4 years? Is it the MAGA cult or the blue MAGA cult? Which group of totally bought into the system of capital cultists do we have to listen to be really annoying and snide? Who basically gets to take the cultural driver's seat? But in terms of policy, nothing changes. In terms of how the people of America are actually treated, nothing changes. In terms of the decline of Western civilization, nothing changes. Like, in terms of every issue that actually matters to anyone, anywhere, nothing changes. It's just that all the flags are blue now, instead of red, or the other way around. Like, it's just so pathetic. It's just become so fucking pathetic. And people are just still bought into this. Kamala continues, my instance for a while since now has been that the death toll in Gaza should not be invisible, and we must continue working towards a solution of mutual benefits where Palestine has sovereignty. We are also aware of the attack to which Israel has been subjected, such as by Hezbollah and Hamas, organizations that record for sexual assaults and attack, and how it defends itself matters. I love that this Kamala bot is like sticking to the bit. Like, Israel does not have the right to defend itself. It's a genocidal settler colonial organization that's coming in and destroying everything around it. Right? Like, they're like the Nazis. Did the Nazis have the right to defend themselves after the Warsaw Ghetto uprising? According to the West, yes, of course they did. That's why we rehabilitated them, right? CH writes, Harris lost this election by repeating Netanyahu debunked bullshit, IDF sexually assaults every day. Yeah, we'll see if Harris actually loses. We'll see what the outcome actually is, right? Like, I'm more or less of the opinion that the power structure was happy letting Trump slip through and kind of let the numbers lay where they were going to lay. Because nobody actually thought he could win, right? I think that's really what it comes down to. Nobody thought Trump could actually win, and then when he did actually win, I'm positive that you had just a bunch of corporate people being like, "Oh, dang, we should have done that thing. We should have changed these results. We should have moved this. We should have maneuvered this, right? We should have bribed those officials. We should have done more." Right? Oh, well, now we got 4 years. How bad could it be? Right? And now they're trying to steer the ship back towards, like, American statesmanness. American statesmen. That is what we want. People of America. America is the greatest country in the world. So it says on the cue card that is on front of me. Right? Like, what they want is they want somebody to stand up there and be like, America is a place where anyone can come and make a good living and live the American dream. And it's up to us as legislators, as leaders, as business people, as entrepreneurs, to stand in front of the American people and give them a vision of how that future will unfold for them. Because this is America. And we believe in America. And God bless America. And that's all they want. They don't want somebody being like, you know, I was with Hillary. I was with Hillary. Hillary, she's not a good person, you know. Hillary. Like, Trump airs the dirty laundry, and they don't like that. Right? They don't like that. Well, and then finally they were actually paying attention to what Trump was actually doing. And Trump was actually making good on a lot of the shit that he was saying. Like pulling out of NATO, right? Like getting out of organizations, getting out of deals. Like, it's, and one of the things that the Republicans will always pound the pulpit on is like Trump was the first president that started no new wars, right? Like that's their big achievement. And it's like, that's convincing. Like, that's convincing. Especially when you got a Democratic Party walking around being like, we're the lesser of two evils. I'm like, are you? Are you? Though? Like, certainly the Republicans are more boorish. Certainly they're more openly misogynistic and racist. Certainly. Right? You guys are over here committing a genocide, though. So it's like, I guess as long as you don't say bad things about the people's ethnic background of whom you are genociding, then you're not racist, I guess. It's just gross. Long Defiant writes, as a citizen that lives in a swing state, I feel that Trump is going to win this election. However, I don't believe the Democrats will let him take office, or maybe it's just an anarchist fever dream. No, I think that the corporate structure is aligned against Trump now. That previously, he had guys like Peter Thiel on his side. He had like more wealth and more power in his sails, right? More people were looking out for him, funding this kind of crazy journey that Trump was on. And I don't think anybody really believed he would win, right? He has less of that now. And I think that the corporate power structure and the military-industrial complex is just coming to the, in my view, like the somewhat logical conclusion that a Trump presidency would be needlessly chaotic, right? That right now the power structure sort of sees things as in hand, even though it's leading itself into complete and total disaster, which is why it views a Donald Trump presidency as chaotic, because Trump doesn't really fit into their narrative, right? I think that they've kind of got him handled now. I think they kind of know what to do with him and how to wrangle him. And and you can see, like, he can't really do that much damage, right? Like, his first term as president, he didn't do that much damage to the power structure. Certainly to the people, sure, but that's every president. Anyway, here I am getting caught in talking about how important the differences between these two groups, when it's just like, I think the miracle would be that Trump gets a second term. Not because I don't think he has support from people. I think that the power structure is just not going to let it happen. Because I think that they've got a better negotiating position with the Democrats. That the Democrats are just more bought in to Silicon Valley, to Wall Street, to the stock markets, to the capitalist power structure, which is, evidenced by when the Democrats are in office, they do the wars for Wall Street. Wall Street says, hey, we could make a lot of money if you started a war in Ukraine. Hey, we'd make a lot of money if you started ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. Raytheon stock would go through the roof if you did this. We'd make a ton of money if you did that. And the Democrats go, yeah, okay. They take $10,000 bribe. They're cheap to buy. Like, it's so cheap to buy a Democrat, guys. Like, I can't believe how cheap these guys are to buy. I used to think that it was at least millions of dollars. Like, yeah, they got to be giving millions of dollars to these guys to make them sell out this hard. In some of these cases, people are voting for genocide for like a $5,000 kickback. Like, it's really, really pathetic. Like, it's really, really sad that it's such a small, pithy amount of money to massacre a people, right? And and so I think that's where the power structure is going to keep power, right? That it doesn't really matter how many votes come down the pipe for Trump. Like, the electoral system doesn't respond to the people in the first place. I don't know why it would start now. Like, it's just, all we're really discussing, like, and I think this is really kind of what it is, and what I think we all need to land on, and where we actually need to get to, right? The only discussion we're actually having is, at what moment is the power structure going to begin governing, ruling, and passing laws while openly dismissing the people? When is it going to simply do away with the idea that the people are interacting with this system in any way that is meaningful? Like, when is that notion going to finally be done away with? because that's how it operates now. Like, that's what's happening right now. And that's true whether or not it's Kamala or Trump. It's just Trump is a little bit more open about, yeah, we're going to make it so that you never need to vote again, right? We're going to make it so you just never need to vote again. Okay. So he's just being open about it. Like, these are the players. You've never really had a say, right? You've never really had a say on how anything actually goes and how anything actually is. We've just thought it's important that you have the illusion of having a say, that your participation has never been a requirement for governance. It's never been important for the maneuvering and the moving around of any of this. It's never actually been part of the process. It's just, when will we give that ghost up? And when will we finally say, okay, look, you don't need to vote. That's always been pointless, right? It's always just been this weird vanity project between like two people who are like buddies anyway. So CH writes, yes, the Zionists prefer Trump to win. Actually, they want to divert money from Ukraine to Israel. But this actually abandons Europe. So it could result in Europe ejecting Nazis, making peace with Russia, and all recognizing Palestine. So that's a weird card possible since Europe hates Trump. I just think that everything you just said there is like copium. Like, all due respect. Like, you're a regular, and I don't think you're speaking flippantly. But Europe rejecting Nazis? Ha 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 ha. Making peace with Russia? Ha 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 ha. All recognizing Palestine? Ha 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 ha. I think that's the least likely outcome. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that Europe is at all interested in rejecting Nazis or Nazism. The people might. Like, the people will gather and be like, Nazis are bad, but the power structure loves Nazis. Nazis are great for the power structure. They're useful, they're predictable, they're willing to do extraordinary acts of violence for money. They're perfect as mercenaries. They're perfect in the power structure. And of course, once you get groups of Nazis, they diligently pursue their goals, right? Which many liberals are in favor of. Yeah, let's get rid of all these immigrants. I'm tired of seeing these homeless people on the streets, right? Well, you can say what you like about so-and-so, but at least he cleaned up the streets, right? Like, so I think the most likely outcome for Europe, should NATO actually decline and become something that's no longer valuable and no longer seen as important, is that Europe will do what Europe has always done. Fall into an internal war, right? Like, this period of time post-World War II is like the longest stretch of time Europe has not had a war with itself. Like, if you take a look at the history of Europe pre-World War II, it's literally just war. It's just war after war after war after war after war after war. There are small skirmishes between countries that share borders, and then there's large battles, and there are large figures like Napoleon, for example. Like, Europe has always gone to war with itself because that's how capitalist systems and that's how monarchical systems resolve their politics. That there just comes a point where the only way that capitalists are willing to resolve their differences and their conflicts is for the bankers to convince the figure-headed leaders of the country to rile up the peasants or get the peasants organized in such a way so that all of the peasants fight amongst themselves to maintain the wealth of the bankers. That's what's always happened. And that's going to happen again in Europe, for sure, 100%. No, CH writes, you can make peace by making peace with Russia or by being conquered totally by Russia. Yeah, I don't think Russia has that ambition. I feel I feel like the global south right now is rising up with BRICS. You have the BRICS organization that's coming up, and BRICS is accepting new membership. It's got its permanent membership, of course, and it's just growing larger, more influential, and powerful year over year. They just recently had like their 16th summit, and it looks as though it's just gaining more and more steam and gaining more membership. And really, it does look like their strategy is to just stand back and watch the United States collapse. Like, it really does look like that's its strategy, to just kind of go like this, like do business with one another, and then just like steadily hold its hands up. And when Europe and America and Canada just kind of go, right, they'll all just go, okay, right, and like defend their borders, right, defend Taiwan, defend Ukraine, defend Palestine to the degree that they can, like defend Latin America as best they can. But it's like, like they're not going to actively do anything to America, because America's just going to do it to itself. Kamala Harris. We must remind about the immigration comment that during Trump administration, 5,000 children has been separated from the parents at the U.S. border, with no report under Biden administration. I cannot tell if this is a bot or not. Like, I don't think it is a bot, because I think a bot would actually, like, no offense, Kamala, you know, have less spelling mistakes or less grammatical errors. You know? Like, imagine trying to take credit for, like, you're maintaining a concentration camp system along the Texas-Mexico border, right? And you're trying to make it like a bright, sunshiny concentration camp system, right? Meanwhile, from the cradle, Israel sets in motion plan for Gaza concentration camps run by CIA-trained mercenaries. Report. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet is expected to approve a plan to establish concentration camps in Gaza, operated by mercenaries from a private security firm run by former U.S. and Israeli intelligence officials and special forces commanders. Yedioth Aronoth reported on the 22nd of October. The U.S. security firm, GDC, plans to establish humanitarian bubbles in Gaza. The Israeli army will be tasked with clearing any such bubbles of Hamas fighters and erecting a separation wall around it within 48 hours. Entry into these compounds will be prohibited except for residents who live in the neighborhood and submit to biometric identification. Regarding the plan, U.S. journalist Dan Cohen reports that the Biden administration has approved the deployment of 1,000 CIA-trained private mercenaries as part of a joint U.S.-Israeli plan to turn Gaza's apocalyptic rubble-scape into a high-tech dystopia. GDC is headed by Israeli-U.S. businessman Modi Kohan, who worked with Israeli intelligence during the war on Syria to supply extremist so-called rebel groups seeking to topple the government of President Bashar al-Assad. Oh yeah, guys. You guys thought that this was going to get better? Or you thought it was going to even stay the same? Get fucked. No, we're going to hell. Like, we're going to hell. Do you guys realize this? That's what America is building for itself. America is building hell. Build hell, get devils. That's how this works. Yedioth Aronoth reports that GDC has participated in various Western-backed wars, including in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Ukraine. It is active in about 100 countries and employs more than 14,000 people. The company employs former fighters in elite units of the U.S. and British armies, as well as Kurdish fighters. These mercenaries are supposed to secure the humanitarian convoys that will enter each bubble. So, logistics, right? Like, even Auschwitz had logistics. The company believes that about 100 mercenaries will be needed to secure each neighborhood bubble. I love that they're calling it bubble. That's great. GDC will start operating within 30 days from the moment of its approval, and the Israeli arm of the company will be entrusted with coordinating the activity with the Israeli army. Among the Israelis involved in the project are Major General Doron Avital, Brigadier General Yossi Copperverser, and former commander of the Navy, David Suhr. Justin Sapp, a retired U.S. Green Beret colonel with nearly 30 years of active duty experience, also helps guide the firm. Funding to imprison Palestinian residents of Gaza in the concentration camps is expected to come from the U.S. government and donations from abroad. The plan will first be implemented in northern Gaza with the intention of expanding it to the Netzrim axis in central Gaza and the Philadelphia corridor of the Egypt-Gaza border area. The plan to establish quote-unquote humanitarian bubbles in Gaza comes as Israel's campaign to exterminate, starve, and ethnically cleanse hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in the north of the Strip reaches its 18th day. Normal. We're just normal, right? We're not Nazis. That's just a normal thing that normal countries do. Somebody over on Twitch, Soha Gamadian. Hello, sir, today. How are you? So the bankers are playing different countries against each other? Yeah. Yes. It's been that way since private banking was introduced. Right? Bankers don't have nationalism. Right? They don't have this loyalty, right? They don't care about things like friends or family. They don't have souls. They don't care. They worship money. Money is the only thing they're interested in, and that's true of every banker, right? That's true of the bank clerks. That's true of the president. That's true of all the shareholders. All they care about is the money. And if they have to pit France against Germany in order to keep their money or make more money, they'll do it. And they don't care. They genuinely do not care. It doesn't matter to them at all. And if they have to manufacture some kind of conflict in order to keep people at odds with one another, when those people are ostensibly allies to one another, they'll do it. They only care about money exclusively and nothing else. Soha continues, by which means do bankers gain power over politicians? Oh, politicians are extremely cheap, dude. You would think that politicians are actually a banker would approach a politician and be like, hey, I need you to do this, negotiate, back and forth. But really, it's way more pathetic. It's way more pathetic. Literally all it takes is some banker or some billionaire, right? Somebody within the power structure who has more money than a pharaoh invites the prime minister or the president to Jeffrey Epstein's fucking pedophile island, right? Shows him a good time, lets him have sex with some 12-year-olds, right? And just literally show him your mansion, show him your grounds, show him your private helicopter and your private planes, all the prostitutes, all of the wealth and everything. And then at the end of the night or at the end of the weekend or whatever period of time, give him a handshake and just say, hey, I had a great time with you. I look forward to working with you in the future. Who do you think these politicians are going to respond to? Do you think they're going to respond to you when you write your little letter that they won't read? That at best the assistant of an assistant's assistant will read and then give you a boilerplate. We here at this administration feel this way about this thing. Because that's the policy that was discussed within that group of assistants that the guy that you're actually writing the letter to wasn't even in the meeting for. You've been abandoned. It's total abandonment. These people do not care about you. You don't even register to them. The only time any politician gives two shits about what you think is during election season so that they can become the person who does everything they're told by the power structure. And the only people who run for these offices are people who explicitly want to do what they're told by the power structure. And that if a person was to begin ascending the electoral system and gain enough power amongst the people who was actually saying maybe these people shouldn't exist, maybe we should do something about this, well, guess what? That person would suddenly disappear. And there would be like a one-liner on page 53 or something. Oh, mysterious death by suicide, 55 shots in the back of the head. And then they would just vanish from the news cycle and everybody would forget that they were even there. Right? Like, that's how this would actually go. And that's how this does actually go. Like, the political system that we operate under has been completely captured by a death cult. By a capitalist death cult that is hell-bent on the destruction of itself, its own civilization, its own people, its own communities, and the natural world itself. And how do I know that's true? Based on everything they're doing. Like, if you actually stop listening to what these guys say, which I highly advise you do, right? Outside of like leaked cables and outside of leaked information, you know, where they're actually talking to one another candidly, right? But anytime they talk in public, ignore them. Do not get hooked into like, don't let the hopium get hold of you. Don't be like, oh, hope and change. Obama's going to come in. I hope and change again. Oh, it's going to be Kamala. She'll come in. It's hope and change again. Fuck you. That's all dumb. That's like believing the WWE is like real fighting. That's like believing that's an actual competition. Like, no, it's not. It's completely, totally a game. And the only thing electoral politics is for is as a vanity project to see which one of these people are going to win the beauty pageant and be picked to do what they're told by the power structure. Like, that's what's actually happening in your country. And this whole, like, let's actually believe for one fraction of a second that there is any politician at any level, in any, even a municipality, a county, a state, anybody at any level isn't completely bought in to the death cult at this point is just childish. Like, I hate to use such strong language, but like, the thing's in fucking free fall. And it's in free fall because it's been taken over by a cult that includes both the Democrats and the Republicans. Yes, Bernie Sanders. Yes, AOC. Yes. They are playing the role of the hero. Hulk Hogan, right? They're the baby face. They're the person that's supposed to make you go, oh, but there are good people working in that system. There's good people in there. You can see them. Look, AOC, she keeps speaking out about the good things that we all want to see done. She's in favor of healthcare, and she speaks out against the Palestinian genocide, and Bernie Sanders is the same, you know. He's about healthcare, and it's and they're there just to funnel you into the cult. They're fucking death cultists. Their interest is in fooling you into believing that the Democratic Party is capable of responding, which it's not. Soha writes, that is just crazy how we really just are living in an oligarchy. Correct. That's the wisest thing a person can actually say. The best thing for anybody to say out loud in seriousness to themselves and their friends and their family members and their community members is, we are living in an oligarchy. The system will never respond to us, ever. It has abandoned us. It is time for us to abandon it back. Stop paying attention. Stop even tuning in. Because all these people are fraudulent liars. Like if Lucifer had a broadcast where he was constantly trying to convince people to murder children, I wouldn't tune in. And I would think that the people who were tuning in were devils. Even the people who were like, you'll never believe what Lucifer said. I'd be like, yeah, I believe it. But all you're allowing yourself to do is get set up, get swayed, be convinced into this failed system that clearly doesn't work. And all we're waiting for now is for a figure to show up and be like, yeah, it's an oligarchy. Who gives a fuck what you think? Whatever. I don't care if you vote. These elections don't matter. And that'll be the president of the United States. Literally being like, whatever. And they'll have an election, and it'll literally be like some guy going around America holding speeches and rallies, which will be indistinguishable from Nazi rallies, or like fucking something from Space Marine or whatever. And people will show up and they'll scream their heads off and it'll be a great time. And he'll run against nobody. And they'll be like, by a landslide victory, 99% of the vote goes to. Right? And it'll just be like Donald Trump Jr. or something. And it'll be somebody who's completely vapid, completely empty, who has no thoughts, is a moron. And it's just there being like, look how great I am. I'm the king of America. And it'll get there. It'll get there way faster than you think. Because, like, the system is already dead. Right? It's been dead for a while now. It's just this shambling zombie corpse that feels like it still needs to pretend. Right? Like it's... Imagine, like, Weekend at Bernie's. If you're not familiar with this movie, right? It's a movie from the 80s. Where this wealthy guy invites these two kids to his mansion for a party, and these two kids are like, oh man, this is gonna be a great opportunity for us. We can go after these girls, we can get these business deals, all this kind of stuff. But then Bernie dies. And they're like, oh no, it's gonna torpedo the whole thing. And then one of them is like, wait a minute, what if we pretend like he's not dead? And then the whole movie is basically just a series of, like, scenes where these kids secretively, like, move this corpse around in various positions to try to convince people that he's actually alive so that they can pursue their own objectives. It's actually, like, a really scummy 80s movie plot. And a lot of these 80s movies were actually really scummy 80s movies plots. Revenge of the Nerds, for example. But imagine that premise that I just discussed. Imagine that movie that I just discussed, except now the corpse is completely rotted. A person comes into the room and Bernie's face is just like, and his like worms are coming out of his eye sockets, right? And yet everybody in the scene is like pretending like he's not a corpse. Everybody's pretending like, oh yeah, that's just Bernie. That's not a dead body. That's not a corpse. That's basically where we're at now. And eventually someone's going to point at it and be like, that's a corpse. And it's starting to happen. It's starting to occur. Because what's happening now is that it's gotten so far developed that the wealthy understand that they have to respond. And so they're hiring a bunch of rich actors to basically come out and be like, okay, guys, it's an oligarchy. Well, what do we do about it? And lo and behold, the solutions are always funnel your energy into the dead end, right? Just keep voting. Vote harder. Sure, that's how you'll resolve an oligarchy, for sure. Soha continues, has there, in your opinion, ever been a time in a non-dictatorial country where the official politicians or statement have had the real power? That's way too vague a question, dude. Like, that's really vague. Like, and is really kind of contingent on what you consider to be a dictatorship, right? Like, there are lots of people who think China is a dictatorship, for example. So, I'd just ask you to clarify that question a little bit. See Death 420, first time chatter over on Twitch. Haha, that's a great comparison. Glad I found you. Loving this stream. Great. I'm glad, dude. Because, like, I just think that we need to get to a point as a people where we say, oh, yeah, like, this is obviously fraud. Like, it's over, right? Like, it's over. We should not be listening to CNN, Fox, MSNBC, The View. We should just not be listening to these people. Period. Like, not even to, like, you'll never believe what... Yes, I'll believe it. I'll believe whatever unhinged, crazy shit they're saying to try to get you to watch. because that's all they're doing. They're just trying to get you to watch. Because just the simple act of your participation gives them credibility that they no longer have. And very steadily, there are other people who are fitting in there, right? Like at first, the like YouTubers and like the uprising of social media was sort of showing that, oh, there's like this alternative media and all this kind of stuff. But now even somebody like Joe Rogan, I don't think you should listen to Joe Rogan. Like, I think that he's basically been, not bought out is too strong a term, but he's definitely like cuddled by the CIA. He's been managed, right? He's just been managed by the CIA, and he's essentially being neutralized as a radicalizing force, and basically exists now to just promote Nazism, while essentially saying like, no, it's good speech beats bad speech, without recognizing at all that every single time you have a conversation with a Nazi, you normalize Nazism, which is exactly what we're seeing happening in America. Generation Y Me, how are you doing? I recently rewatched Pretty in Pink. My God, so terribly racist and rapey. Dude, like, 80s films were all like that, right? Like, they were all like that. They all had this, like, very rapey vibe and this very, like, sexist, misogynistic worldview. I always recommend, especially for Gen Z people, right? People who don't necessarily know about these 80s films that I was watching as a child. Films that I watched when I was like a kid and were considered suitable for kids. Or if at least not suitable for kids, it was like expected that kids would watch it, right? Like, oh, there's nudity in it. Well, they're going to see nudity. What's wrong with a little bit of TNA? One of the plots in Revenge of the Nerds. So Revenge of the Nerds is a movie that is about a bunch of like loser nerds, right? Who are getting beat up by the jocks. And so you're like on the side of the nerds. But they're obviously like horny pervs the entire time. At one point, they do a panty raid on the sorority girl house that of the sorority girls that they're all horny for. And they install cameras so they can spy on the girls. Just boys will be boys, right? Ha ha. And then the big climax of the piece is that one of the primary protagonists of this film dresses at a Halloween carnival, dresses in the same outfit as the boyfriend of his love interest, and then has sex with her while she thinks he's her boyfriend. And even better, when she discovers that he is not her boyfriend, in fact, that she has, in effect, been raped, she's in for it. She's down. And then they're like a couple. And then as the series went on, it was like straight up like they were a couple. Like, that's what 80s movies were like. Yeah, MASH, the movie. Joe writes, my friend says there's no such thing as hate speech. Your friend is stupid. Like, just, sometimes you just got to say it. Sometimes you just got to put a pin in that and just be like, okay, buddy, that's a dumb fuck thing to say. Of course there is such a thing as hate speech. Very, very obviously. Very, very plainly. Like, and nakedly and in normal ways. That what's creepy about these free speech purists, these free speech fundamentalists, is how easy it is to show how creepy their worldview actually is. Like, so it's totally cool if me and a group of men organize in public loudly, like I'll go stand on a stage, and we'll make plans for how to round up women and rape them. Right? Well, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. Free speech. Hey, we're just planning it. Good speech beats bad speech. We're just talking here. This is just us talking, right? We're just organizing plans for how to kidnap and sex traffic women in public, openly, in a public forum anybody can come into. And if you come in here and don't like what we have to say, well, then you tell us why, right? You tell us why. And then we'll have a hearty debate. Good speech beats bad speech, right? Right? We'll have a healthy debate about it. Only a dumb moron would think this way. Only the stupidest person you've ever met in your life would actually say, yeah, that's fine. That's fine that groups of people can get into rooms with one another and have open public discussions in open public spaces that they film and put on TikTok about how to round up the Jews. That's fine, free speech. That's a creepy position. And if your friend is holding on to that position, your friend's probably just a Nazi. How do you articulate it to him? Like, so we can organize sex trafficking rings in public, right? So we can organize rounding up the Jews in public, right? We're just talking, right? And then what you're going to find is that his solution is going to be, well, then we'll just defend ourselves. Okay, cool, so it's a civil war, right? So instead of actually empowering your systems and your institutions to be like, no, you creepy Nazis. In fact, if you try to do that, we'll put you in jail just for doing that, right? If you organize in public and make these public statements, we will come and grab you and put you in prison cells like they do here in Canada. Proudly and greatly. I'm happy that they do that here in Canada. There was a guy here in Toronto distributing pamphlets talking about how we needed to round up the Jews. He did 2 years in prison, and I'm happy he did. Good. I'm grateful that I live in a sane, rational country with sane, rational worldviews and laws that actually grab people who are saying, let's round up the Jews. Bye. Fuck your free speech. Bye. And if your buddy is going to stand there and be like, yeah, it's fine that people talk about rounding up the Jews in public collectively together, thousands of people, free speech, your friend is a Nazi. Soha rather, over on Twitch. I was just wondering if it has always been this bad in the West. Like, since when did the wealthy bankers and whatnot gain influence? So that's actually an interesting story, Soha. I don't have these, like, the specifics right in front of my fingertips right now, but the general brush is the banking community really took control in England and Europe. And there was actually a big fight in America over what the role of the banks should be. Andrew Jackson had a very famous quote that doesn't get spread around a lot for the obvious reasons. He was asked at the end of his life what he thought his greatest achievement was as president, and he said, I killed the bank. And Thomas Jefferson has many statements of what private banking would do to the country, and they basically have come true. And you have to go to Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, who was the president of the United States, he was a single-term president for in 1921, and he quietly passed the Federal Reserve Act, which erected the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank that the United States government borrows money from, and that the way the currency runs and the way everything operates right now is through a fiat process, that the United States basically has money printed for them by borrowing money from a private institution called the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve, this private institution that manipulates the currencies of NATO, essentially, is what is essentially setting financial policy. And their only objective and their only goal is more money for themselves. So you can trace it back farther than 1920, farther than Woodrow Wilson, but the struggle between the banks and the West and the political apparatus has been one that has always existed, because bankers intrinsically understand that if we control the currency, like if we own the money, then who gives a shit? Like, okay, so Elon Musk has $200 billion. So he's influential, clearly, and has power, clearly, right? But we own that money. We own the money itself. We own the system that generates that money. Who's got the power? right? And the wise billionaires, the wise rich people, right? Because Elon Musk is a dullard, very dim-witted person. The real intelligent people are the people who you don't know, who you've never heard of in your life, who've arranged themselves in such a way so that they never show up on a list, ever. You never hear their names. If you do, it's in this very kind of quiet, hushed, Voldemort-esque sort of way of just like, oh, the Rothschilds, you know? Like, but you never actually seriously know who these people are. They don't do interviews because they're smart. They're not morons, right? They know what their social position is, and they're not actually interested in being deposed. But they're getting lazier, right? And a big reason why they're getting lazier is because the populace is dumber and is way dumber than it's been in a long time. And so they've erected institutions like BlackRock and Vanguard and Sixth Street, who literally own like 80% of the stock market. And it's just like, there they are, these just like hedge funds that exist to own the American economy, being run by people who genuinely believe that the best way to run an economy is to make number value go up. You know that money that we print? You know that money that we print, that we're responsible for printing? Well, the way you build an economy is to try to get as much of that money that we ourselves print. That's the best way to run an economy. And it's just destroying everything. And why? Because you're literally printing the money, you morons. Like, we literally erected a game of get the most money, and we've completely detached it, utterly detached it from anything that intrinsically matters. We've detached it from land. We've detached it from water. We've detached it from forests, mountains, streams, the air, whether or not people have houses, whether or not people have food, whether or not people are living a decent quality of life. We've completely detached money from all of that. And in many, many cases, the pursuit of money means that you take those things and grind them up and destroy them, because that's how you make more money. And America has perfected a money-making model, which is spend a lot of money making military equipment, use that military equipment on some helpless, defenseless target so that we don't kill Americans. What we don't want to see is American body bags. Right? So you just murder a bunch of people from the skies, or have a populace destroy itself, like the Ukrainians are doing. And then once the war ends, you rebuild, and you make a lot of money rebuilding. And then once the rebuilding process is done, what do? Drop bombs again. Infinite money-making glitch. And all it costs is human life. And wasted generations. And wasted time. Not to mention the environmental damage. But none of those matter because you made a lot of money. And that's the only goal. Soha writes, do you think it was better when currency values were based on precious metals? So the benefit of something like a gold standard is that you can't just print more gold. So what it does is it slows everything down. It makes it more difficult. It's a limiter, right? Like the gold standard, it puts a limit on what people can and cannot do and what they can and cannot achieve, which of course psychopathic capitalists argue is a negative, right? It's infinite growth in a system that is limited. That's the capitalist mindset. And so it had that benefit, right? But that said, like, gold is like, it's just a shiny rock, right? It's just a shiny rock. And while it does have this kind of limiting quality, like you can't just print more gold, it doesn't change the fact that the people who are actually responding and the people who are actually making the currency, the people who are actually like directing money in places, like, in my view, that's what matters the most. It's just, where are you putting your money? Where are you, like, the state creates money and maintains money whether there are sections of that that are privatized or not, right? It creates the money and it uses it and spreads it into the society and says, these things will make you lots of money, these things will make you no money, right? Like if the state suddenly released a policy that said anybody that works at a McDonald's must be paid $100,000, and they completely subsidized the McDonald's industry so that it always had the capital it needed to function at that level, then the most sought after jobs in the country would be McDonald's, right? And the state could absolutely do that. The state does that with lots of things. Why don't they? Because they don't really value that. It's not really something that they consider to be valuable, right? Like how they don't consider it's valuable that you have housing. Like they don't actually think it's valuable that you have food or clothing, right? That's why it's not subsidized. It's only valuable when it's a crisis for them. But and that's true whether or not it's a fiat currency or whether or not it's a gold standard, right? All the gold standard does is it puts a bit of a limiter on things. It makes things a little bit more difficult to wiggle around with, but not by a lot, not by enough. Katie Yoder. Don't know if I've ever seen you here before, Katie. Good to see you. Oh, we've got another one of these. Okay. Yes, it is now. Vote blue and increase accountability. AI Bill of Rights. The U.S. Defense and Homeland Security Departments have paid $700 million for AI projects in ChatGPT's launch. I mean, again, I don't think there's much difference between the red or the blue. So, what they're doing with AI is just the dumbest shit. Like it is. It's just so stupid. Like, just at its most fundamental level, it's my criticism of cryptocurrency. We're going to take a finite resource, right? Fossil fuels. We're going to burn that finite resource in order to erect, a toy, basically. And AI is not going to do the thing that it claims it's going to do, right? It's not actually going to increase productivity. It's not actually going to do these things, right? Because there eventually comes a point where what you're trying to do is replace a human being, and there is actually such a thing as the humanities, and it's just not going to function. It's not going to actually work. It's not going to actually do the thing that it's promised to do, because these people are fraudulent liars. Like, nothing Elon Musk has ever said he has done has actually worked. So I don't know why he thinks this is going to work. I don't know why anybody thinks this is going to work. It's clearly just a bunch of salesmen selling a product to gullible rubes. Like, how much more money can we squeeze out of these people? I know what we'll do. We'll tell them that there's AI technology, and we'll make a little toy box that can generate a picture. And we'll have like a little movie thing that we'll make, right? But all they're going to end up doing is just creating a bunch of trash. Just a bunch of garbage. And they're going to try to pass off all that trash and garbage to us as actual art. And they're going to think so little of us, because they do think so little of us. They think that we're they think that we're incompetent rubes, that we're just cattle basically to them. And so they're basically going to put the equivalent of like Tinky Winky in front of us and expect that to fly. But here's the real problem, is that for millions of people that'll work. Because I think millions of people are like that, are just completely bought into this failed system that doesn't work. But they get a Big Mac, so that's it. Long Defiant writes, society would collapse without McDonald's. All the doctors who treat diseases would go out of business. Yeah, I love it when people say, like, but the economy would collapse. My response has steadily become good. Good. Collapse the economy. I want this economy to collapse. This is a pathetic, worthless economy. It should collapse. Yeah, burger eaters just want their next burger. Yeah. Soha writes, you mentioned Nazis desire free speech, but weren't the Nazis pretty much anti-free speech when in power? I would imagine there are other types of extremist groups that actually want the free speech much more. Yeah, Nazis are also liars, right? Like, they're also psychopathic liars, right? So they'll scream their heads off about free speech and then rob you of yours. Like, there's no moral consistency with what Nazis say. The only moral consistency that Nazis have is who has the most power. That's the only thing Nazis care about, right? That's why you should not permit Nazis to have speech. That once it's clear that this person is a Nazi, they should be forbidden from speaking. Because Nazis are only interested in two things. They're interested in terrorizing you and organizing against you. That's the only thing they're interested in. They're not interested in having debates. Like, you can read what the Nazis wrote about liberals debating them. Like, Nazis love conflating and confusing and beguiling and frustrating people. They don't care if they lose the debate. Like, you understand? Like, a Nazi does not care if they lose the debate. So free speech for them is just a recruitment opportunity. It's just a way to find where the Nazis are and to send a flare into the atmosphere to say, hey, other Nazis, come here. I am a Nazi. That's all free speech for Nazis means. Right? They don't care if they lose the debate. And the whole good speech beats bad speech stuff is childish. Like, it's a dumb worldview. Especially when you have organizations like Fox News or the CIA. Forget about Fox News, the CIA, who have multi-billion-dollar budgets. Like, yeah, you can have all the free speech you want while we literally bombard every single state, every single city, every single municipality with clear singular messages that just scream constantly as loudly as possible across all devices, across all platforms, just screaming it in your face over and over and over again. So that, and if you stand up and go, I don't know about this, you have a whole bunch of gullible rubes being like, what? But the thing said so. Everybody knows that that's true. It takes them a day to put together a nationwide smear campaign and a lie campaign. It's going to take you your entire fucking life to ever have one idea even be heard, and by then they're on to the next and the next and the next and the next, because they have a multi-trillion-dollar platform and you've got fucking nothing. Like, of course they're free speech purists. Like, of course... Yeah, of course, it's good speech beats bad speech. Now, but we got to round up these immigrants. Round up the immigrants, round up the immigrants, round up the immigrants for every single moment of every single day, just screaming into the society, round up the immigrants. What do you think's going to happen? Like, what do you fucking think is going to happen? Yeah. Generation Y Me writes, in Yaroslav Hunka's blog, for those of you who don't know, Yaroslav Hunka was the literal Nazi who fought in World War II on the side of Adolf Hitler against the Russians, who was honored in the Canadian Parliament. Still, my favorite moment of that is when the Speaker of the House read it. He was like, oh, he fought in World War II against the Russians. And he paused and he went like this. His eyes shot right up, and he had this dawning recognition moment of, like, this guy's a fucking Nazi. But then he realized that, oh, I better keep reading this, and then he kept reading it, and it just kind of hoped nobody noticed. The entire parliament stood up twice to be like, yeah, Nazi! Hey, everybody, it's not even a neo-Nazi, it's a literal Nazi. First generation Nazi. Hooray! So that's what we're doing here in Canada. Right? That's your liberal government for you. Yaroslav Hunka's blog post, he wrote about the free speech he enjoyed in occupied Ukraine because he loved free speech when it meant talking about how bad Jewish people are. Yeah. CH responds, Hunka is perfect. He should get a statue in Ottawa. Make sure to add to Victims of Communism monument. Yeah, exactly. Jeff writes, you were the first time. Fox News and all corporate news are the CIA. Yeah, they even bring them on air as panelists. Yeah. I mean, it's at this point, like, we don't have the smoking gun on that. Like, back in the 70s, there was Operation Mockingbird, right, where the CIA was trying to get involved and was being involved in media. If we did another audit of the CIA, which we definitely should, we would find out that there has been a second Mockingbird. Like, These people are CIA assets, and it's so obvious that that's the case now. Generation Y Me says, apparently that statue is canceled now. It's being built in Ukraine instead of somewhere here. Yeah, well, put a Nazi monument with the Nazis, right? Like, I feel like as more and more information is coming out about how pro-Nazi Canada and the United States was post-World War II, and what the actual objectives of the Roosevelt administration were, and what the actual objectives of Europe and America actually were post-World War II, it becomes more and more obvious. Like, more and more people are being like, oh, we were really never against the Nazis, were we? Oh, we always kind of liked these guys. And it's just getting really obvious how scummy we actually are. Like, we're pretty much pro-Nazi in this country. Like, we understand that it's uncouth. We understand that it's uncouth to be Hitler-esque. We understand that it's uncouth to praise Nazis. But, like, we love them. We give them money as often as we can. We support all of their policies. We support all of their ideas. We allow them on all of our panel discussions. We allow their ideas to spread wherever. But if you were to stand up and actually say one communist idea on any panel show anywhere, you would be rejected immediately, right? Like, that's why you never hear anybody actually saying, like, hey, you know how we could solve this housing crisis by nationalizing a lot of the developers? That's how we could do it, right? No, you can't say that. But you can talk about policies that create mass homelessness, right? And create mass poverty for everybody. That's completely fine. Because the Nazis, like, I'll say it over and 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 over again. The Soviets defeated the Nazis, but Nazism defeated communism. For sure. That when the Americans get involved in World War II, it's to defend the Nazis. Long Defiant writes, aren't Jewish people in charge of Ukraine? I mean, Zelensky is a Jew, but that doesn't really mean anything. Like, I've never really understood why, because this one guy, like, because no one's ever been a sellout. There's no such thing as an Uncle Tom, right? Although, I mean, if I was as generous to Zelensky as I possibly could be, if I was actually like, okay, let's take Zelensky's position and let's actually look at him and actually give him the biggest benefit of the doubt that I could possibly give him, I would begin by saying, okay, so let's say he takes office and he really does believe, because he ran on a platform of ending the Donbass war. That's the platform he ran on, right? So let's believe that. I don't think we should, but let's believe it, just for the sake of the argument. So here's Zelensky, a Jew, taking office, winning on a platform of I'm going to end the Donbass war. And let's say he actually believes it. And in fact, there's a little bit of evidence to show that he did believe it. That he went down to the front line of the Donbass war and said, okay, pack it up, it's over. And you know what happened? The Nazis there said, fuck off. We don't take orders from you. Because you know who funds the Azov battalion? You know who funds the Nazis? NATO. NATO is where they get their marching orders from. They don't give a fuck what Zelensky thinks. And they never did. So just because Zelensky is the guy that got elected to that position, and just because Zelensky is a Jew, it's completely meaningless. Like, it's utterly beside the point. Because the Nazis take their marching orders from NATO. They don't give a fuck what Zelensky has to say. And I think Zelensky found out pretty quickly that if he continued pushing this issue, and he actually attempted to make headway and actually attempted to end this war, it would earn him a bullet in the back. And so I think that there's a turning point where he just realizes that his strategy is, how do I get as much money out of this as I can? And then what's my exit strategy? Like, how do I just extract as much wealth from this and then just run as fast as I can? Right? CH writes, stop equating Ukraine Nazis with Azov Battalion. The entire concept of Ukraine is white supremacy and genocide. I don't know if I'm willing to take that step. But definitely there are powerful groups that operate within Ukraine with impunity that are certainly white supremacist. Like the Azov Battalion is one such organization. I don't know if I'm willing to take the step into saying that the entire project is that way. And that mainly comes from, I don't know nearly enough on the subject to make that jump. I know quite a bit about like the modern history of Ukraine, but and a little bit about like little spots, but I wouldn't call myself an expert on like the whole history of Ukraine. But I mean, like, what it's doing is so stupid. Like, it's just so self-destructive, right? Like, Ukraine exists as a real, like, warning to the rest of the world. Like, this is what happens if you allow the far right to take over, right? If you allow the far right to take over in your country, this is the result. This is what you get. June writes, is Lenin a white supremacist now? I mean, no. I always find those charges against Lenin and Stalin and Putin to be the strangest. Because Russia is like an extremely ethnically diverse country. Like it's a real show of how dumb American white supremacists are. Like American white supremacists look at Russia and they're like, "Oh, it's mainly white." And it's like, is it, my man? Like, there are some people in that country that look like you, but there's a lot that don't. Like, it's a very ethnically diverse country. And you can watch Lenin and Stalin and Putin and all of their predecessors going around Russia and talking about it. And talking about the ethnic diversity that exists in the country and how it's a strength for the country. Like, CH writes, it was a psyop by the rich in 1917, and it's still a psyop. The nationality is Ruthenian, saying Ukrainian is a power grab eastward over Russian-speaking people. But I do think that, like, June's point is true, right? Lenin recognized Ukraine as a distinct nation, for good or for ill. I also do think that there's, like, Ukraine has always been traditionally the corridor of war, right? That's the real truth of Ukraine, right? So Soha over on Twitch says, yes, Russia is a very ethnically diverse country, but those ethnic groups are for a large part white. So now we need to get into white theory, Soha, right? That the concept of whiteness didn't exist until American slavery, right? That before American slavery, whiteness as a concept simply didn't exist. You were either British or French or Polish, right? And they had lighter skin tones, sure, but it was never perceived as a concept of white, right? The concept of white versus black or anything like that. That comes out of the slave period in America, where powerful people, slave owners, needed to create distinctions and drive wedges in the populace. What they didn't want to see is they didn't want to see poor white-skinned farmers and peasants and indentured servants allying with black slaves and creating larger unions and larger organizations based on class issues. They wanted to make sure that these two groups were heavily divided. And a good way of doing that was obliterating nationalities, which was fairly easy to do, well, easier to do, because a lot of these people are recent immigrants, right? A lot of these people came from Ireland and England and France and Spain and Germany, right? A lot of these people came from there, but those are left behind. So what's left? What identifying figure do you have outside of where you came, what your nation used to be? Well, now we're all Americans, okay? Well, I know what distinguishes us. You're all white. You all have light, fair skin, And these people are dark-skinned. They're black. So you are now quote-unquote white, and you are now quote-unquote black, right? But that's a distinction that doesn't actually exist. Like, yes, they have a darker skin tone. They have less or more melatonin. I forget which direction it is. But it's a social construct. The concept of whiteness is a social construct that exists within our consciousness because it benefits wealthy people. To have us divided along those lines, to be divided by the color of our skin than by our class, than by our economics, than by who owns things, right? It's far more beneficial. But if you don't have any class consciousness, if your worldview is reduced to nationalism and race, which is a very childish worldview, then you will project that upon all nations and all things. So you'll project that onto Russia. But Russia never had this. Russia never went through a period of whiteness versus blackness. That never actually happened. That if you look at the history of the Soviet Union, they were always talking about how there are all these different ethnic groups and how diversity is our strength and how we all need to work together along this class line to ensure our mutual success, that even though we have these different backgrounds and ethnicities, we are all part of the great country of Russia. And they never delved into this concept of whiteness. It's just not a thing. There's never been this homogenizing that happened in America. You're not Polish, you're not Austrian, you're not German, you're American. A white American. And so it's projection is what it is. And it's projection by people who have literally no class consciousness. Soha continues, I think the categorizing the races was mostly done in Europe, though. Maybe it was inspired by the contact of races in America, but the idea of race has been strongly present in Europe for a long time as well. But you'll find that those distinctions were usually nationalistic, and that nationalism really comes around as an idea in Napoleonic France, right? That before Napoleon and before this sort of national rising, it was mainly just clans and families, right? Like everything was organized along clan and family line. And then, and of course, like there would be distinguished, like these guys have red hair. They're the McCullens, right? Oh, you must be a McCullen, right? And you'd have this whole like, but it was like families and tribes, right? And then you'd also have the distinction because of the way the feudal system worked throughout European history. You would be the servant of a lord, right? So there'd be the lord and his land, and he'd have serfs, and it was just understood that you were on the lord's land, so you were this person's person. But as that system begins to break apart, as the feudal system begins to degrade and become the capital system that we have now, the family, tribe, and serf distinctions also degrade and fall apart. And for a period of time, especially if you take a look at France during the Revolutionary period, it's literally like complete and total chaos. Like no distinctions, no nothing, just complete destruction, a cleansing of all things. And it's from this that nationalism rises up as an issue, right? From Napoleon. And the Jeff writes, what about the whole white blood in Germany, the Aryan race thing? Right, but that happens well after the slave period, right? The Nazis are looking at the segregationist and the American slave period for how to organize their society, right? So it's America first and then Germany. And in a lot of cases, the Germans said the Americans went too far. Right? To just give you a sense of how far down the pole we actually are, how far away from civilization we actually are, right? The Nazis were looking at us saying, that's too much. Soha continues, and people try to simplify what Europeans used to believe about race in the past, but it's just more nuanced than just the American idea of black and white. Yeah, no, of course it's much more nuanced, because I think that most people were, for a long period of time, rooted in a feudal system, right? That feudalism, it didn't so much matter what your skin color was or what this was. It mattered, were you loyal to the Lord? Were you part of the Lord's land? Like, that's what really mattered. And of course, there's like, if you're from like Africa versus Ireland, you know, there's going to be distinctions and people are going to have skepticisms, right? Like, just because of basic othering and basic fear of the unknown shit. But the major distinctions for a long period of time was who was your lord? Who goes there? Right? Like you hear that phrase in a lot of like Shakespearean writing and a lot of theater from that day. There's always this phrase, who goes there? Right? You hear it everywhere. Whenever there's any like medieval thing, you'll go to like some shitty medieval show or something, and what do they say? Who goes there? Okay, well, there was an expected response to that. You wouldn't just be like, Bill, hey, my name's Fred, right? You were expected to have a response to that. That would say, my name is Jonathan of the house of Tarley, right? Here's my documents. Like, and that was the expectation. In feudal Europe, if you were literally caught off the land without documentation, you were straight up a non-person. Straight up. Like that's what feudal Europe was actually like. Like you were either on the land, or if you were off the land, it was because of you had the permission of your lord and you had a piece of paper that said who you were. And if you didn't have that, then they could literally kill you. They could literally just kill you, hang you, just do what they want. They could sell you into slavery. They could do whatever they want because you were not a person. You were a non-person in the feudal system. And so whose lord you are, or it matters a lot. Matters a lot in the feudal system. And that's the primary distinguishing factor. You can have a black person, you can have some person of some ethnicity, and if they had the document that said, hey, I'm in the service of this lord, here's my paperwork, wouldn't matter. That because race wasn't the primary distinguishing factor in the feudal system. In the feudal system, it's whose lord you were. That's what really fucking mattered. And like if something bad were to happen to the servant of a baron, you knew that the baron would be upset with you, that there would be hell to pay, or maybe you were fine with that. Maybe you were at war with that baron, or whatever. But this concept of just putting people in compartments and thinking of them as race first comes from America, and it comes from the slave period, and it was in order to obliterate nationalism, to obliterate national identity, and to create a new homogenized group of people called white people, who could be put as a foil against who? Black people. And why is that important? Because we don't want poor white people and black slaves to organize together, which is essentially what ends up happening anyway. They end up doing that anyway. That's the whole abolition period, and then Lincoln, right? The idea of races predates the Napoleonic Age, sure, but they're like, again, you'll find that those ideas are more built into the concept of like a national identity or a location or a geographic location. Oh, you're from Italy. Oh, you're from this place. There isn't this homogenizing idea that exists. And that's really what you've got to grab onto if you want to move forward with white theory. Is that the purpose of white theory is to homogenize the nations, is to homogenize everything, and to make it so that there really is like an us versus them, and it's based on the color of skin. And that's really the theory. That's actually how that works. And just because like ancient people understood that people over there were black and people over here were of a different skin color, that wasn't the primary driver of their worldview, the way that it is now, right? Like the trying to really grab hold of a really good example. Like the Italians fought everybody that was white, and they didn't give a fuck. Didn't matter to them at all. Nobody stood up and said, we can't fight them. They are also white. White people fighting white people. Whatever will happen. That just didn't happen. Right? No, they're Phoenicians. We're going over there to take over Phoenicia. Like, we want it. Like, it's just skin color didn't come into it. Like, we can acknowledge that that exists, but it's not what we're deciding things off of. We're not basing all our decisions off of that idea. Whereas now we definitely do. Like, we definitely do. Right? CH writes, Italy is part of the Genocide 7, but the least racist genociders. I mean, they got it out of their systems, right? Rome was the Roman Empire, right? They just did it 2,000 years ago, and then they kind of got tired of it, so they let everybody else do it, and they're like, yeah. But the Roman Empire is having a resurgence. Everybody's like glorifying it and pretending like it wasn't just a shitty place to be. There's been a clear distinction between nationality and race in Europe for a long time before Napoleon, and the idea of race was born completely separately from the birth of national identities and nationalism. And I must add, the American idea of race used to be quite different from the European one. No, yeah, like, I mean, you're pointing out that, like, these things are within the existence of a zeitgeist, sure. But I'm saying that never has it been so homogenizing and central than in America today, right? Like, today it doesn't matter if you are of Polish descent. It doesn't matter if you are of German descent, English descent, right? French descent. It doesn't matter. You're white, right? We can look at you. You're white. Soha writes, you are right that national identity has always been more important categorization than race in Europe, but that does mean that there wasn't completely different racial categorization. For example, look up Carl von Linn. I just feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over again. So I think I'm happy with what I've said. So, Kamala Harris chiming back in. Donald Trump has ceaselessly tried to divide our nation. In our government, we will work for all Americans. We will work on reducing high rent costs in Los Angeles and New York. Medicare for healthcare. What a fucking joke. Nobody has worked harder to ceaselessly divide the nation than Democrats. Nobody. Like, even the Republicans, like, believed that what they were doing was going to unify the nation. They were wrong because they're dumb. But, like, so when Bill Clinton removes welfare from millions of children, does that divide the nation, you think? Or does that unify the nation, do you think? Like, imagine believing that the Democrats give a shit at all about any American anywhere. Like, the only reason someone like Kamala Harris is running is because it's a vanity project. Because she wants to be the president. So that she can sign the documents and she can go, ooh, look at me, I'm the president, I'm the super important person. Like, nobody believes you. I think that's the big thing. Like, we just don't believe you anymore. You're obviously a liar. Like, obviously a liar. Like, give me one reason why I should believe a word you have to say. Especially as you commit a genocide. But Israel needs to defend itself. No, it doesn't. Generation Y Me writes, Madam, this is a Tim Hortons. Nitrogen oversight. Ethnicity matters in Europe, not race nor nationality. Yeah, it's the question of ethnicity versus race versus nationality, right? It's a tight knot to weave. And really, like, I feel like we're getting a little lost in the sauce here. Because the entire point that I've been trying to kind of pinpoint and point out the entire time that I feel like is getting lost, and I don't understand why, is that concepts like ethnicity and race, ethnicity and nation in America were sublimated and suppressed in favor of racial distinction. That race, instead of being like of note, like a descriptor, he was a black man, he was a white man, instead of it being like that, it became the defining characteristic. It became the thing, the top, the very apex of the hierarchy upon which everything else flows. Like, that's the concept of white supremacy that exists in America, right? And that's really the point that I'm trying to drive home. I'm not trying to say that the concept of race never existed. I'm trying to say that it's never been the very top and the apex of the hierarchy until America. CH writes, Harris is pissed she is no longer a good-looking Jennifer Beals lookalike. No, hold on. Let's not, that's low blow. That's low blow, CH. Kamala Harris is a beautiful middle-aged woman, okay? I would be so lucky to take such a beautiful woman out on a wonderful date. I think that we would have a wonderful time, me and Kamala Harris together, right? So let's not go after someone's looks, right? I feel like she's a handsome woman. Trump is also a vain and seeking power and a way to seek attention. Yeah, I mean, that's... I got to tell you, I think there are two things that drive Trump. One is boredom and the other is spite. I think that if Obama had never had made fun of him, if Obama had never made fun of him and never actually said, "You'll never be the president" in front of everybody and had everybody laugh at him, I don't even think Trump would have run. Right? Spite can get you pretty far. Soha says, yes, I feel the American way of categorizing people primarily based on lines of black, white, etc. is just a product of American culture and very specific to America. Well, and it was done for a very specific reason. Right? It's done specifically in order to align poor white people against poor black people and black slaves. Right? Like, it's done specifically to ensure that the indentured servants, the indentured white servants, don't buddy up to the slaves of that exist in America. That's the reason why it's done. And incidentally, it's the reason why it's maintained. Right? It's the reason why this whole black versus white dynamic persists in America and still exists and is still absolutely the thing, is because it's economically beneficial. And we've seen it in other countries as well. Like apartheid South Africa, that's the reason why that happened. It's economically beneficial to the people who have power to say that, oh, we all happen to be of fair skin. We are all white. Doesn't matter what nation we came from or whatever. We all have this single characteristic. And the people who we literally want to enslave, right, happen to have a dark-skinned complexion. And then we also have these people who are poorer than us, who also work for us, who we don't want allying with our literal slaves. So how do we separate them? Well, whiteness. That's what we do. Right? And it's not the only time it's happened. Like, again, apartheid South Africa is a good example. But it's a powerful tool, especially when you're dealing with people who have a very limited, low-level kind of class consciousness, who haven't really thought about it before. It's the big reason why Americans are so poorly educated. Like, the power structure does not want to have Americans be educated about their own system or their own society, right? You want to make sure that Americans are just smart enough to work the machines, but too stupid to understand what's going on around them. CH writes, I thought Harris was dumb when she asked Kavanaugh if he could think of any laws specific to the make body? I don't know what you're saying, bud. Obviously, conscription was the answer. She was lucky he didn't end her with that. Like, I don't think that Kamala Harris is a very intelligent person, right? Like, I mean, she's a United States prosecutor, for goodness sakes. Like, I don't think you really get into that line of work if you're an intelligent person. You just understand where power lies and where you are beneficial within the power structure. And because of the Democrats' sort of obsession with projecting a false image of giving a shit about diversity issues, she's the perfect candidate from the Democrat perspective, right? Black woman. Checks those boxes. Like, is she capable or is she competent? They don't really care about that. Because, again, the electoral system is not really a relevant institution anymore. Yeah, Jeff writes, the USA passed a bill to allow women to be drafted. It got little media coverage. Yep. Nitrogen over on Twitch writes, ignoring race entirely, as a European, I don't understand why Americans prioritize nationality over ethnicity. If a child is born in the US to two German parents, Americans will say the child is American. While if the child was born in France to two German parents, we'd consider the child German. Yeah. Well, nationalism is very important to the American strategy, right? Like, America doesn't actually have any unifying projects, right? And the leaders of America, the rulers of America, the owners of America, let's be extremely clear about who we're talking about here, are completely disincentivized and completely disinterested on creating unifying projects. And unifying projects can be really simple stuff, like really like things that you would consider extraordinarily basic. If you were playing a video game of like, let's build a civilization. Well, one of the major things that you would definitely consider like key and important would be roads. You would just say roads. We'll just build roads, right? Roads and railway and communication centers and things like this. You would consider that just banal, normal stuff. A power grid, right? Like it would be like, it would just be built into the idea of you doing what you're doing. It wouldn't even be something you really planned. It would just be like an off, like, yeah, of course. Well, America doesn't fund any of that. It doesn't give a fuck about even that. Even this extremely basic concept of roads. Like rail systems. Connectivity between states. Connectivity within itself. Total disinterest. Not at all interested whatsoever. And a big reason why they're completely disinterested in that is that anytime there's a disaster, they either get bailed out, so free money for them, or they get to just jack prices on everybody, so free money for them. So they're completely rewarded for having this dilapidated, shitty infrastructure. And it costs money to update it, so why bother doing it? So they don't. Right? They don't. And so when you don't have any actual, real, genuine unifying projects, when you have nothing that actually says it's worth, that the concept of America is worth a damn, right? Then all you have left is nationalistic propaganda. That's all that remains. And because it's so cheap to do, in fact, you can make money doing it, right? Because if you create strong enough propaganda, or propaganda that's effective enough, people will pay you for it, right? Take a look at the Marvel franchise. It's essentially American propaganda, and we pay them for it. Like a bunch of dimwits and dummies. But so if we allowed this idea that you're talking about to persist in America, where, oh, two German people have a child in America, that makes them German. Well, the ruling class would look at that and say, oh, that's at the beginning of the end of the only thing that we have to unify America, which is that they're Americans. Right? Oh, you're not of German descent, you're an American. Right? Nope, whatever you had going on, that's over. You're in America now, you're American. America. And that's it. But even that's beginning to reach a kind of natural failing point. because now there's big questions about who is or is not a real American, right? Texans, for example, believe that Texas is the real America and that the rest of America is not the real America, right? And so there's this like a no true Scotsman fallacy that exists within the consciousness of America now, where there is such a thing as a true American. But the whole concept is fanciful. There's no such thing as America. America is an idea. It's just a concept with an institution that doesn't respond to the people anymore. And because they're not, and because they're no longer responding to the people, and because they're no longer making unifying projects, more and more people are beginning to go, hold on a second. There really isn't anything, like America doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. There's just this police force that beats the shit out of us if we don't do what we're told. Good to see you, Jackson. Soha writes, the reason why I emphasize the particularity of the American idea of race to America is because this conversation arose from the context of the people groups of Russia. And I think it's much more appropriate to use the European view of race. I don't think it's necessary to bring the American history of slavery to this equation. Like, I mean, if you want to have an exclusive conversation about Russia, sure. But I'm just, like, America happens to be, like, the predominant worldview that exists in the conversation and is in decline. And there are reasons why it's in decline. And so I don't dislike your view of race. In fact, I would really love it if race took a back seat. Right? If we acknowledge the realities of slavery and acknowledge the reality of the kind of the whiteness period, while simultaneously saying the most important thing is actually still class and class dynamics. Who owns what? Right? Who are the owners of this society? That would be my preference. Israeli Bot writes, what do you think about National Socialism? Yeah, ban the Nazi? I think you're right. I don't think we need to hear from the Nazi anymore. Happily banned. Yeah, Israeli Bot asking about National Socialism. Get out of here, you fucking creepy little Nazi Zionist. Yeah, I think you're right, Jeff. There was like a little part of me that was like, maybe let's let the Nazi hang himself, but I think you're right. I know that you, especially Jeff, get after me for that, so I'm going to be a little bit tighter on that, I think. Especially as I'm doing less shows, you know what I mean? Like, I'm doing less shows, so I just have less... I just have less patience for these Nazis showing up and being creepy, weird little Nazis. Well, let's do a quick pivot. Yeah, Nazis are pretty cancerous. I should say so. So Musk, our favorite soy boy. I shouldn't say soy boy. I don't even really know what soy boy means. It's just such a weird thing to say. Either way, Elon Musk, apartheid emerald mine baby, Elon Musk, subpoenaed by the U.S. Virgin Islands in the Jeffrey Epstein case. This is from The Hill. Twitter and Tesla CEO Elon Musk has been subpoenaed for documents by the U.S. Virgin Islands in the case against J.P. Morgan Chase Bank in connection with sex trafficking by the late Jeffrey Epstein. In the subpoena, filed by the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York, the Virgin Islands seeks any documents reflecting or regarding communications between Musk and Epstein about J.P. Morgan or Musk and J.P. Morgan about Epstein, as well as any documents about fees Musk paid to Epstein and or J.P. Morgan dating back to 2002. The subpoena further seeks all documents reflecting or regarding Epstein's involvement in human trafficking or his procurement of girls or women for commercial sex in that same period. Man, wouldn't it have been crazy if we actually did all this work, like when Jeffrey Epstein was alive? Man, it'd be so wild if we had actually done all this work the first time we arrested and incarcerated Jeffrey Epstein. Literally the only reason any of this is happening is because there's like a Netflix documentary about it. Like, straight up the only reason why they've taken like an intern in the FBI and given him this case and basically been like, yeah, good luck, Mr. Intern, is because there's enough public support being like, hey, wait a minute. Every single time any information comes out about the Jeffrey Epstein case, it like goes all around the socials, and everybody's like, who's a sex trafficker now? Eggs D writes, Soy Boy came from the right. They claim soy increases estrogen in men and makes them gay and beta. Right. No, that's correct, XD. So I retract my Soy Boy statement. I was just reaching for an insult and came up with that, and I immediately knew it was wrong. I just feel like calling him a Nazi is too easy, right? Like, it's just too easy. Generation YME writes, soy is objectively better in my opinion, though. Soy is great in coffee. I love my coffee like I love my men, full of soy. Hey man, whatever turns your crank, you know? So in the last half hour of the show, let's just stare directly into the apocalypse, shall we? What do you guys think? Huh? Who wants to stare, eyes bright wide open, directly into the bright light of the coming apocalypse? Nearly half of mainland United States is in a drought. That's it. That's the headline. That's the whole thing. No, there's a video, but I don't want to play the friggin' video. Like, get out of here. Get out of here. I don't care about that. Like, it is October 29th. And I can walk out of my apartment. I live in Canada. I can walk out of my apartment in t-shirt and shorts. October 29th. It just didn't used to be this way. You used to have to put on jackets. You used to have to put on, like, gear. And as we're heading closer and closer towards the catastrophe that we're all marching towards, it's just going to get more and more obvious and more clear. I mean, from a beekeeping standpoint, it's good news. Mild winters means bees survive the winter, right? That's good news. But, like, it's just gotten... I just don't even know what to say about it anymore, right? Like, I just don't know what can be said anymore. That really we are looking at a future that is going to have dramatic events and dramatic changes. And most people are either ignoring it, denying it, or seem to have fallen into this just acceptance of it. That there's this like, oh well, we missed our chance. We missed our opportunity. And the truth is that we did miss our opportunity. We did miss our chance. That there was a window. There was a moment where we could have gone, oh, this is actually mattering. This is actually affecting us. This is actually like a real thing that we really have to look at. And we could have done it. But the unfortunate truth is just in that moment, when we needed people in positions of power to be acting the most rationally, the most in the interest of the people, most in the interest of the countries that they originate from, the people we had in power were a death cult that worshipped money and didn't care if it murdered everybody. That for them, little scraps of paper that their own nation was responsible for printing mattered much, much more to them than the survival of the species, than the nation that enriched them. Like, those are all externalities as far as they're concerned. And we're simply going to be living in the world that they created. This just careless, narcissistic, psychopathic world that says it's just going to be warmer. Water systems are just going to change. Flooding is just going to happen. Weather is just going to be more dramatic. We're just going to have to deal with it. And some people will be positioned better than others to deal with it. But everybody is going to face the catastrophic reality of what this means. Jeff writes, do you think they thought this way 53 years ago, the last time we had these temperatures? I don't think I really understand your comment, Jeff. Like, here, let's find the other one. Like, we have absolutely been charting this. We have absolutely been paying attention to this. We have absolutely been looking at this. We have absolutely been measuring temperature and been measuring the climate for years and years and years and years. Since as late back as the 1800s. Like, and it's as clear as it can get. Like, it's just a line that goes up. And of course, it's not directly straight line, totally linear. But come on. Is this it? No. There's the one that I really liked using. I want to use and I want to use it here because it's just, I'm kind of surprised that there is this kind of like desire for it to not be true. Oh, there it is. Video plays soon. Video plays soon. Maybe I'll just let that happen. Like, oh, sure, like on the news today they said Toronto hasn't seen these temperatures in 50. Like, sure, there's a spike up like once. But like we're not talking about like a one-off. Like when you look at a chart that's like dotted out, right? There's always like one or two that are like measured. Like what we're looking at is not like a single aberration or a fringe thing, right? We're not seeing some kind of, there's a word for the thing that I'm reaching for. We're not seeing like a one-off, right? We're seeing like a pattern, a consistent pattern that is being measured that I'm putting in front of you right now. Like I just like, so you can see like down here, sure, there was like a little spike up, right? And I bet you dollars to donuts this little spike up, you know when that probably is? It's probably when we're dropping nukes, right? Here's the little drop nuke spike up. Well, what the fuck is going on up here? What's this? Right? Like we have all of this like unexplained phenomenon. Like this goes back to like 1880. Right? So from 1880, we're existing this pattern. Right? When does it start to go up? Like a fun fact, right? Not shocking at all. We got a huge spike up when World War II, industrialized warfare, right? There's this huge spike up, unsurprisingly at all. Huge spike up. Humans can affect climate. We can do it. Here you go. I guess it's just coincidence, though. Up it goes. And then it comes back down. Right? Comes back down. Why? 1949 is literally when the People's Republic of China is formed. Right? Like, we're not dropping bombs anymore. There's no longer warfare happening all across Europe. Now it's just like localized bombing campaigns against defenseless populations. But it continues. And the burning of carbon dioxide, most fossil fuels have been burned in the last 30 years. Like, that's something that I think people don't really recognize and really grab a hold of. That we have been exponentially increasing our CO2 emissions. And that most CO2 has been emitted in the last 30 years. Right? So over the course of our lifetimes. Right? So we had that one spike up, probably the temperature of the 50 years you're talking about, but here we go. Right? Here we go. Burn, baby, burn, right? Drill, baby, burn. Drill, baby, drill. Frack it. Here we go. And this chart stops at 2022. Right? But in all cases, like, why is this happening? What is happening here? What is occurring here? Like, there doesn't seem to be a counter narrative. Like, the counter narratives that are coming up don't seem to make any fucking sense. Right? Nuclear bombs. Like, we drop nukes. Not just dropping nukes on civilian populations, we were also testing nukes. Setting off a lot more nukes. Like, that's a huge amount of emissions and a huge amount of heat added to the system. That the system, because it's a spike, right? And I've said this over and over again, right? The system can repair itself. It can. That's why the most important thing for us to do is to stop polluting, right? It's not to create some kind of device or create some kind of idea or create some kind of thought or to do anything. It's just to stop. It's just to stop emitting. Because the system itself is capable of healing itself, right? Like, it created us. It generated all of this. Like, we didn't create any of this. We were born into this. Right? So the system is generative and regenerative, and it can regenerate from this. We just have to stop, but we're not going to. Because we're entranced. Because we refuse to actually acknowledge our actual position in the universe. We need to ascribe value. This is the ultimate failure of the hierarchical thinking, is that things need to be valued. And so everybody scrambles around for, how am I more valuable than my neighbor? And a lot of people just grip for, like, oh, I've got a jet. Oh, I've got cars. I've got a Bugatti. This kind of childish nonsense. This is how we ascribe value to one another. This is how we assign value. Instead of actually saying what's actually true, which is that we all have equal value. We are equally valid in the passing of the universe and through the passage of time. There's no such thing as a more valuable person. Just how there's no such thing as a more valuable music note in a symphony. The whole concept of assigning value to an individual is silly. It's a silly thing to do. Jeff writes, is it human-caused climate change or military-industrial complex climate change, and we are all paying for it, except the military who are exempt from carbon pricing? Yeah, isn't that funny how that works? Right? The military doesn't have to be a part of the conversation. They're externalized from the conversations for some reason, even though they're obviously the primary emitter. New CIA drone pilot writes, here in Ecuador, the drought is very severe, and we are most reliant on hydroelectric energy. We've been having blackouts of up to 17 hours a day for the last month, though the real cause is the ideological opposition to finishing projects that would have expanded our generation capacity and watershed for the dams. But those projects were done by evil suckdems, so no one touched them for the last 7 years. Yeah. Like, it's just so petty. Like, it's just such petty bullshit. And, like, this worship of money, and nobody is actually willing to stand up. Nobody is willing to stand up and actually say, this is like, if we were treating the climate change crisis as if it were an invading army, we would have already had everybody on rations. We would have already been funneling enormous amounts of state resources to this. We would have already been restructuring our entire economy to deal with this crisis. Right? Like, our whole media apparatus would be talking about nothing but it. But I just think that because we're in the thrall of a death cult, right? We're in the thrall of this death cult that refuses to acknowledge that there are forces more powerful than it, right? That the only existential threat that it will take seriously is another group that it perceives as able to topple it. But, like, climate change is like the White Walkers, man. Like, it's going to take all your goddamn petty politics and just walk right through it. It's not going to care at all, even a little. Right? You're going to be dealing with all your petty, dumb bullshit and talking about who has the biggest Bugatti or whatever, and then climate change is just going to go... It's just not going to give a fuck. New CIA drone pilot writes, now the situation is dire and the government have managed to force through privatization of key national industries, allowing private electric generation, now talking about raising the rates by 50%. Oh yeah, your country's done, dude. Like, the moment you're privatizing your important infrastructure, your key infrastructure, right? Privatizing electricity, privatizing water, right? It's just the end. It's just it. Like, you're going to be facing situations where you're looking at a blackout and they're going to be like, cool, that'll be $500 an hour for electrical connection. And you're going to be like, I can't pay that rent. And they'll be like, cool, freeze. We don't care. Fuck off. We did the calculus. We find out that this is the best way that we can get money. Because there's one billionaire that lives on one hill right over there, and he wants to play Xbox. And because there's a generalized power outage, because we haven't updated the grid, because we're completely disincentivized to do that, we can only afford this much electricity generation. And this guy who sits on the top of the hill and wants to get a blowjob while he plays Xbox is willing to pay us $500 an hour. Are you willing to pay us $500 an hour? No? Then die. We don't care. Fuck off. That's precisely and exactly what's happening. That's what privatization of resources means. Like, that's what it actually means. And we're just watching it happen and allowing it to happen. Yeah, thousands of people needing dialysis have already died. It's a tragedy. Yeah, and the capitalists don't give a shit. You should have just worked harder. Like, that's the thing these Nazis will say. And, like, that to me is going to be the wildest part about the climate change catastrophes, is that the Nazis are in charge, right? And they're going to make decisions. They're going to make a series of very bad decisions very quickly, because their entire worldview is just based on this hierarchy that doesn't exist, a value that doesn't exist, And the way that they measure who has less, more or less value is based on who has more or less access to paper dollars that we ourselves are responsible for printing. Like, like I can only describe it as a religious ideology. There's nowhere else to go. Right? Like I don't really buy into the idea that it's insanity. Right? I understand that as a descriptor, like it is madhouse. But it's a religious ideology. And it's a religious ideology that has a stated agenda and a stated goal that they defend. Right? Which is maximize profits for the individual in a free market system. That's what they say. And then somehow that will have the best outcomes, even though there's no evidence to support that. But they don't care about evidence because it's a religious ideology. And it works for them. Right? They're rich. And they don't care who they have to murder to do it. Like, there's no thou shalt not kill within the system of capital. That doesn't exist. Yeah, I mean, isn't that just the thing, Joe, right? Joe writes, this is why it's so infuriating when my fellow working men and women defend this inhumane system. Yeah, I don't understand that at all. Like, I don't understand why anybody is rising up in the defense of it. Like, it's just daddy worship at this point. Like, you're either completely bought in to the religious ideology of it, and the only reason that you would be bought into the religious ideology of it is because you are one of its inevitable beneficiaries, right? It's just inevitable that you're going to have a small handful of people, just like how when you play a game of Monopoly, right? If you play a game of Monopoly, it's inevitable that one person ends up with all the money and all the property. That's just an inevitability. That person isn't a genius. The person's not the greatest Monopoly player that ever lived. Right? They're just the person who happened to get the right breaks. Right? Like, that's how Monopoly actually works. Like, you can talk about, like, positioning yourself in clever trades and all this kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, if you just roll the right numbers and get the right positions at the right moment, you win that game. It's fundamentally a game of chance. And it doesn't matter if you play the game with it doesn't matter if you play the game with 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, or 100 billion people. The result is exactly the same. One person gets all the money and all the property. That's how it works. It's an inevitability. There's no moral justification to it whatsoever. But the capitalists have ascribed have described morality to it. And of course they have. They've assigned morality to it. And of course they have. Because they want to believe that they are good, when obviously they are not. Like, most of them are just empty and venal and have nothing to contribute. They're just parasites. They figured out a way to get 10,000 people to give them $1,000. Right? That's all they've done. June writes, we could have wished that the Russian armies should be standing on their present lines as the friends and allies of Poland instead of as invaders, but that the Russian armies should stand on this line was clearly necessary for the safety of Russia against the Nazi menace. Winston Churchill, 1939. Yeah, I don't know how much I love quoting Winston Churchill, but I take your point, June. Well, and a big thing about the humanities, and one of the things about people, and it's something that Goebbels understood, right? If you just say something, this is why I really highly recommend that you don't even listen to these people anymore. Don't tune in. Don't even listen to people who criticize these people. Tune out completely. Because if you are told a lie long enough and loud enough and often enough, you will believe it. It will affect your worldview. Like, even if you intellectually understand that that is false, you will still instinctively act as though it is true. And this is why the whole free speech puritanical shit I don't go for. Because you're basically just begging for everybody to believe total bullshit just because someone's funding it. I just don't think that we should go for that. Soha writes, if the capitalists are in charge, then Nazis can't be in charge. I think they are mutually exclusive. Okay, dude. So, fascism. So it's capitalism stands at the very top, right? Capitalism is the largest thing. Capitalism. And what defines capitalism is the relationship between owners and laborers, right? What has traditionally been called bourgeois or bourgeois and the proletariat, but owners and workers. Some people own the ability to make and manufacture things, and some people own nothing but their own labor and have to sell themselves through a process of wage slavery to the people who own the means of production, the ability to manufacture, the ability to create things. This is the defining characteristic of capitalism. Okay? That's what defines capitalism. So the capitalist the purist capitalist will say, oh, we need to operate within a free market, right? So we just need to ensure that the freer the market, the freer the people, right? Like that's your pure capitalist ideology. So there are offshoots of capitalism and offshoots of thought from capitalism, and one of those offshoots is fascism, right? And what fascism says, fundamentally, is business people should be the rulers of the society. The industrialists, the powerful men that own the means of production should also own the political apparatus. And that there should be a merger of the corporate state, of corporate power and the political state. And that's fundamentally the backbone of fascist thought. It's not the only thought that the fascists had, but it's the one that I would point to and be like, that's what makes a fascist a fascist. If you are and it's perfectly understandable, right? If you said, let's merge the church and the state, you would be a theocrat. And everybody would understand that's theocracy. Well, if you want to merge industry and state with the people in charge being the industrialists, then that's fascism. Right? Pretty understandable. So an offshoot of fascism is Nazism. And Nazism says, Nazism takes that idea and then gives it a racial category as well. And says, there is a superior race. In the case of the Nazis, it was the Aryans. In the case of the Zionists, it's the Jews. In the case of the Americans, now that's a different subject, but that's fine. Because in the case of the Americans, they took it back to fascism and then offshot into neoliberalism, and they realized that the offshoot of Nazism was too disruptive, let's say. It caused more problems than it helped, and it always led to this kind of catastrophic war. And so neoliberals took it back to fascism, right? Neoliberalism is a fascist ideology, but then said, oh no, it's fine if you're black or you're Puerto Rican or whatever, right? That's fine. But as long as you bend the knee to corporate power that owns the state, right? That's the point. Is corporate power owns the state. And so I think it's truer to say that not every capitalist is a fascist, but every fascist is a capitalist. That fascism is an offshoot of capitalism. Yeah. So I think that's a fair thing to say. Soha says, I know this is a very debated topic, but I've understood fascism is more about centralizing industry to the state and not about giving the industrialists more power. Yeah, come on, bud. Like, just listen to the statement you just wrote. Right? I know it's a very debated topic. It is, yeah. And I have to say, Soha, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think you've been very respectful and very kind, and I really want to take a moment and thank you for that. Lots of people come in here and ask the questions or make the comments that you've made, but they do it in a very condescending or dismissive sort of way, and I don't get that from you. I think that you've been very kind to me, and I hope I've been kind to you while we've been doing this. So I'm very grateful for that, especially tonight. So you said, I understood fascism is more about centralizing industry to the state. Okay, who owns that industry? Is it the state? Is it nationalized? Is it the people that own it? Right? Is there an organization? Can you vote? Right? Does that industry respond to your needs or demands? Or is it that industry is centralized in the state and then all of the profits and all of the benefits go to the industrialists who then also use the workforce to subsidize their losses? Which one sounds more accurate? Which one seems to hew closer to the truth? And so I find it kind of odd to say that it's more about centralizing industry to the state and not about giving industrialists more power. Then what are you doing with centralizing industry to the state then? Like, what would that do except give industrialists more power? Unless you're talking about true nationalization, right? Which would mean getting the industrialists out of the picture. And it would be the state that owns these apparatus, who ostensibly act on behalf of the people. Right? Now that's a whole other idea. Now you're in a whole other category, right, of nationalization. But that's not what happens under fascism. What happens under fascism is that the industrialists merge with the state, but maintain their ownership and maintain their position. And so the state becomes subordinate to the industrialist and the demands of the industrialist and begins to operate for the benefit of the industrialist. And this allows industrialists and bankers and corporatists and all of these groups to make worse and worse decisions because they always know they'll be bailed out. They always know that no matter how bad they fail, they'll just be able to say, too big to fail, and then they'll get bailed out. That's the beating heart of fascism. And that's how that works. And I would make the argument that capitalist systems naturally degrade into fascism. That it's a natural process. That the sort of idealized version of what capitalism is, the idea of operating in a free market and that everybody is making the best decisions for themselves within that free market, and then that somehow creates an equilibrium, right? That concept of equilibrialism doesn't actually exist. That capitalism naturally degrades so that power concentrates inevitably into the hands of small groups, and that the concentration of that wealth is not based on some kind of moral attribute or some kind of superiority. It's just an inevitability, right? So no matter how large those groups say how smart and how brilliant and how intelligent they were, they just happened to be the group that managed to get the money because the dice rolled that way. And that's how it actually works. Like, when you play a game of Monopoly, that is how it actually works. And so once it gets into that position where one person or small groups of people have most of the wealth, which is where we are now, well, the natural response from the people and from the society is redistribution, right? Like, the money goes back in the box and you start the game anew is typically what we do, right? And so you redistribute and you start the game until finally it comes up under. But but the ruling class and the ruling people don't want the game to restart. They're completely disincentivized to restart the game. They would prefer to hang on to their wealth. And so what do? They buy the political system and they merge their industry with the political system so that they can never be toppled. They say things like too big to fail, right? They say they can that this is the natural order of things. This is normal, right? And meanwhile, they've steadily merged with the state, and they can never be and they can never be extracted. Baldy, how you doing, bud? Did you see Justin Trudeau announcing on Twitter that he's going to reduce immigration? I get that the Liberals are leaning more right-wing and getting right-wing voters, but holy crap, they're not trying to hide it. Like, how xenophobic can you get? That's an interesting one, right? Because, like, it is true that the Trudeau administration has essentially increased immigration at a pretty, like, a huge rate. Like, it does need to be stated that it has been a lot of immigration, right? And the strategy behind that is straight up. I think there's a couple of strategies, and one of them is that immigrants increase economic activity. Immigrants are willing to take jobs that nobody else is willing to take. They're willing to live in situations that nobody else is willing to live in for a period of time. And so Canada is facing a major economic crisis. Like Ontario, for example, has an economy that's worse than Alabama's economy right now because we've been led by neoliberal hacks for way too long. There's no good ideas going around. And so there's just like a lot of incestuous ideas that are failing and are not working. Our leaders are literally, like Doug Ford literally said to homeless people, just get a job the other day. It's just like the end of rational thought. And so and so a solution to this, we got the OECD, right? The OECD has said that the next 2 decades, Canada is going to have the worst development amongst what they call the developed nations, right? Like, this is a crisis. It's a major, major crisis that if you were the leader of the country, you would, and you actually gave a shit about your country at all, you would be like, okay, yeah, that's the thing to try to fix. Like, how do we deal with that? And so the solution that the Trudeau administration has reached for is immigration. And it's not incorrect. Like, it does kind of work in a way. But it's only going to be a patch job, right? Because it's not going to deal with the underlying class dynamics, the underlying capitalist dynamics that exist in the society. It's just not going to deal with that. And so, but now because it's been so much, and it's been an enormous amount of immigration, right? And I think the Liberals basically took a look at it and made an economic calculus, and they really didn't add into their equation that Canadians are actually pretty racist. Like, we are as nationalistic as the United States is. We're a settler colonial nation. Like, we're based on the same principles, the same ideas. The only reason we get this rap as being nicer is because there's not that many of us, right? And we're kind of quiet. We don't want to cause a fuss because our strategy is basically to have America do all our dirty work for us, under the principle that as long as they're not looking at us, we're fine. So Pierre Poilievre is taking advantage of that and basically saying, this is crazy what we're doing. This is nuts. And of course, it's just the scapegoating, right? The reason why housing prices are how they are is not because of the system of capital. It's because of immigrants. The reason why you can't get a job is not because of the system of capital. It's because of immigrants. The reason why you can't get a promotion, it's not because of the system of capital. It's because of immigrants. So it's just the classic. It's the same thing that all right-wing groups do. But Trudeau has really dangled it in front of them, made it really easy to do, right? And if you like walk around in Toronto, it's like, I remember, not the last time I went downtown, but like the time before that, I was like, there is a ton of Sikh people here. Like way more than I was used to seeing. And I'm like ostensibly not against that. Like, yeah, cool. Like this is a multicultural nation. It's the strength of the nation. We are a multicultural community. I think it's a good thing. I think diversity is strength. Like I think that the more diverse you have, the more diversity you have within an organization, the stronger that organization is going to be. It's going to have more worldviews. It's going to have more positions. It's going to have more perspectives. It's going to understand things better. It's going to understand that it has to negotiate, and that negotiation and diplomacy is important and should be done. Right? You get less situations where you end up with just like lockstep one-mindedness right off a cliff. But the truth is that there's enough bigots in Canada to make it really matter. So and I mean, so Trudeau's responding to it, right? That's what it really is. Just Trudeau's responding to it, and Trudeau knows he's going to lose this next election. Like he knows. How could you not? Take a look at the polls. Soha continues. I mean, it never was full-on nationalization in the communist sense in any fascist state, but weren't the industries made very much subjected and subordinated to the will of the leaders that were in charge? No, bro. Like, no. Never once. Like, I who are you even talking about? Like Hitler was directly funded by the industrialists. Like, and Hitler did what he was told by the industrialists. Like there's this narrative that Hitler was this madman that was going off on his own thing and all this kind of stuff. No, he was doing what his owners wanted him to do because they didn't give a fuck about Germany. They didn't care at all about Germany, right? They cared about their money. And so if Hitler wrecked his own country and destroyed everybody and murdered 1 million people and rounded up the Jews and did all this kind of stuff, they're like, cool, we made money. We don't give a fuck about any of these people. We're psychopaths. So the idea that it's like, it's the fascists that took over and like there was you're just falling for the propaganda. Like you're just falling for the show. That the industrialists and the bankers and the people, like, I'll give you the clearest possible example I can give you. Like the clearest example I can give you. Henry Ford. Right? We know who Henry Ford is. Henry Ford of Ford Automotive. Right? You'll see his trucks driving around today. Ford. Built Ford tough. Like a rock. Right? We know what we're talking about? Ford, Henry Ford. Henry Ford was the man who gave Hitler's armies the engines they needed for their machines, for their trucks, for their tractors, for their tanks. Without Henry Ford funding the war machine, the Nazi war machine, they don't have a Nazi war machine. They don't have automotives. They don't have trucks. Hitler was the guy who created Volkswagen so that he could begin the process of creating these automations in Germany for the German people, for his own self. But they were getting all of it from Henry Ford, who had been doing it all along. So embedded was Henry Ford in the Nazi regime that the Nazis gave him the Iron Cross, which is the highest honor that a civilian can get from the Nazis. The entire time that's happening, the Americans know. Like, Roosevelt is aware of this. This isn't happening in secret. There are legal cases where during the war they bombed factories during the war, and Henry Ford sued the American government because those were his factories. Like, and what does Henry Ford want Adolf Hitler to do with all this automotives that he's creating and he's making? He wants them to use them. He wants them to use them so that he can destroy some of them, or so that he can repair some of them. So that he can do what? Buy more from Ford. And Henry Ford doesn't give two fucks about whether or not Adolf Hitler uses it on the French or the Spaniards or the Polish or the Russians or the Italians. He doesn't give a shit. Like, maybe he does in like an esoteric, like political, I have a political mind kind of way, but all he cares about is that he sells Adolf Hitler more tanks. That's it. So Adolf can do what he wants. He can blow up whatever he wants. He can drop whatever he wants on whoever he wants, as long as he keeps buying Ford. And that's the relationship that the industrialists had with Adolf Hitler. They didn't give a shit. As long as Adolf Hitler rounded up the communists, they were fine if he rounded up the Jews. They didn't care. As long as he rounded up the communists, and he rounded up the Jews, and he rounded up their political opponents, and he bought their products and did what he was told, they didn't give a fuck what else he did. And in the end, they didn't give a fuck if he blew up that country. Why? Because they didn't even live in the country. Henry Ford lives in America. They don't give two fucks at all. So the idea that Adolf Hitler is at all in charge of whatever these industrialists are demanding or saying, what are you talking about? He did everything he was told. Like, he did everything they told him to do. And if the dog went off his leash and decided to roam and decided to do all kind of stuff, you know what the industrialists thought about that? His funeral, I don't give a shit. I don't even live there. Soha writes, so is Ford left to operate simultaneously in America and Germany during the war? Yes. Now you're starting to see it. Now you're starting to understand it. Yes. America funded all sides of World War II. America played all sides of World War II. Put money into Britain, put money into Germany, put money into the Soviet Union, put money wherever it thought it could get a return on its investment, and it didn't give a fuck about anything else. The only reason the Americans eventually got directly involved in World War II is because Stalin defeated Hitler on the Eastern Front. That the Bolsheviks pushed the Germans back and broke the line of the Germans and were pushing them back to Germany. And the Americans knew that if we don't get involved, Stalin will go right to Portugal. He'll take over the UK. He'll take over Europe. And then all of Europe will be communist. And all of those industrialists and all of those bankers will lose everything. Because the Soviets don't give a fuck about your banking system. And so the Americans come in and they meet the Soviets at Berlin to save the industrialists and to save the bankers and to save their investments. The Americans didn't come in to defeat the Nazis. The Nazis had been defeated. The Soviets did it. The Americans came in to prevent the advancement of the Soviets into France, taking over all of Germany, Spain, Portugal, the UK, London. That's the reason the Americans got involved in World War II. And they made up this, like, we gotta stop the Nazis. They loved the Nazis. They worked with the Nazis. They praised the Nazis. They admired the Nazis. If the Nazis had have defeated the Soviets, Adolf Hitler's greatest ally would have been Roosevelt. Like, the only reason the Americans put boots on the ground was because the Soviets were going to threaten the bankers. And that's it. Yeah, easy to play the Europeans against each other when you watch from a distance and profit from it. Yeah, that's exactly right. But if industrial capital had never been put at threat, the Americans would have never gotten involved. Like, let's say Adolf Hitler just makes a declaration. It says, generalized withdraw. We're not going to pursue this war of aggression against the Soviets anymore. And somehow managed a de-escalation, and the Soviets just went home. Like, the Americans wouldn't have gone in. We got to stop the Nazi war machine. No, they don't. The Soviets already stopped the Nazi war machine. That already happened. Baldy writes, holy crap, I learned something new today. Thank you, John. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to present you an alternative position on what's going on. Like, once you learn about Henry Ford and the Nazis, it's like really, really difficult to see America the same again. Like, all of this, like, sun shining glory on the hill, we got to go defeat the Nazis. If you wanted to defeat the Nazis, you just say to Henry Ford, hey, stop that. Oh, you're restricting the free market and this regulation is killing an innovation. There's your capitalist innovation right there. Well, we've reached the end of this one, you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. You are the guys. You guys are making this a real treat for me, I gotta tell you. Like, I'm so grateful that you're here. Each and every one of you. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.